Washougal City Council workshop meeting. Jennifer, please.
Councilmember Morris?
Here.
Councilmember Shoemaker?
Here.
Councilmember Costin?
Here.
Councilmember Greenlee?
Here.
Councilmember McDaniel?
Here.
Councilmember Russell? And Councilmember Dollar.
I did get an email from Michael saying that he was unavoidably at work flying.
And let the record show that Councilmember Russell is here. Public comments. Anything from the public before we get started this evening into the council's agenda? Okay, moving right along. Our presentation for with Nelson and Company we have put off until the next workshop, but I would ask Jennifer and Dave if they could do a quick update off of the bonding interview that we had late last week and how that went.
Sure. We were on a phone conference with Standard & Poor's to try to increase our bond rating, because that in turn gives us a lower interest rate. And it went really well. We had provided quite a bit of information up front to the analysts, and so they didn't have too many questions. Pretty basic. And I haven't gotten any follow-up emails on any additional questions, so I think that's good. And so we're supposed to hear back, I think, the middle of next week, around the 22nd, 23rd, on where that rating is going to come in. And so we decided that since the bonding action isn't going to be until mid-April, that we should wait and hold that presentation until closer to when we're actually going to bring the bond information forward. So that's why we pushed it.
Our bond rating is what now?
It's currently A+.
A plus?
So we're hoping to go to, what, double A minus.
Try to get 2 A's instead of 1 A.
What does that do on a percentage-wise for interest?
What do you say, quarter to a
Yeah,
half?
it's quarter to a half.
Quarter to a half.
It's pretty significant.
25 to 50 basis points.
Thousands and thousands of dollars. Yeah.
What, because we don't play with little projects, we always play with big ones?
Just because of the time and, you know, how much time, yeah. But it's millions of dollars in bonding, so.
And 30 years to pay it off and all the other things that go along with it.
20.
We're looking at a 20-year.
20.
Yeah, there are some things, though, that council has done recently that hopefully helps move that forward, correct?
Absolutely.
Correct. Adopting the 5-year rates was definitely points in our favor for a higher rate. Adopting the financial policies.
Lower rate.
Lower
Sorry,
rate,
lower
higher
rate.
rating. Yeah.
Higher rating. Higher rating, lower interest rate. Finish the sentence.
It is funny how an A plus is not as good as
A double A minus.
A double A minus.
Yeah.
I know, but definitely those actions they asked about those things. They asked for the ordinances and the resolution on the policies. So they were very happy to see that those support the bond package to be able to do those projects that are called for.
Our advisor, Jim, is very bullish for us. He's feeling pretty positive. There's no guarantee in that, but he feels pretty positive about our chances to get an upgrade. And he did a great job of preparing us, the team, and the staff did a great job. Trevor's not here with us, but Trevor, Jim, and Jen, and RJ answered the questions that were posed by the analysts at S&P just very professionally and very quickly, and made us look really good. So,
David, are we competing with anybody when we're doing this? We're not necessarily competing with another agency. We're only fixing ourselves or upgrading ourselves.
correct. We're competing against some pretty standard metrics that they use, all kinds of financial things like a loan officer would do on home lending, what your debt ratios are, what your capitalization this, and a lot of things that I don't really understand fully. But there is apparently some art to it and some feel, and some of that has to do with their perception of how well managed the utilities are, from the elected legislative body to the administrative elected into the system. And so your proactive actions and adopting policies and following those policies and adopting the rates are all part of that good management, down to how the staff answered questions about our system and how on top of the system that they are. I was just so impressed with how that all came off. So we'll see. Hopefully we'll get a AA minus, and it'll save us a little bit of money and corroborate the types of decisions that you're making.
Jennifer, what would be the high end if it's AA minus? What is it, AAA plus? I mean, where's the?
AAA is as high as it goes.
AAA?
No city our size is ever going to be AAA. In fact, I'd be amazed to see a city at AAA.
Hmm.
The highest municipal rating I've ever heard of is AA plus.
There's been some issues with bonds. I don't know if you've read, with muni bonds. There was a little bit of a hype going on about municipal defaults, and it caused a little bit of sell-off, and so rates didn't respond well to that, and that's tapered off again. And the timing that we have, according to Jim, might be really good. That not only are the rates coming down and the climate for rates is improving a little bit, then couple it with the potential for it, we'll see. We'll know when we're back with you, we should know when we're back with you in a couple weeks and Jim is with us. He'll have a good presentation on what all the steps will be for you and what he expects to happen and how we'll be moving forward.
I'm so glad to see us going this route, because in the last couple of months, it appears that there are nations who are dumping our bonds. There are other nations that are considering it. And in the last couple of weeks, there have been rumors, I haven't been able to confirm them yet, that some of the large commercial bond dealers in this country are starting to consider dumping bonds and not buying any more bonds, U.S. bonds. So maintaining our own credit rating, doing things by ourselves, great idea.
Yeah, anything that we can do, you know, to this local level to help, you know, go through and take care of our own and watch our own and make sure our house is in order is helpful. And that's why I wanted to make sure that you certainly knew that the effects of, I know the votes on utility rates and that type of stuff are difficult to go through, especially when you're looking at increases and multiple year increases, but it's certainly knowing that this could come forward in the next year those are steps moving in the right direction, and making sure that the oversight is there for the utilities themselves. So, other questions that other council members may have? Obviously, you're going to have a lot of time with Jim when he makes the presentation as well, of, you know, more infinite information as far as potential rates and where our rating comes in and that type of stuff. So we're looking total dollar amount up to is 14 million.
Roughly 14, yes.
But it's one of those things, kind of like a line of credit. If we don't need it all to cover things, we don't certainly have to take it all and pay for that. So, okay, thank you. E Street project. There he is back here. Jim, how are you?
Good, good. Well, good evening, everyone. I don't know, Mayor Gary, if you wanted me to start off and just chat a little bit about our meeting this afternoon, so I think we'll touch base on that. We'll give you a brief overview on E Street. We'll start out with just a PowerPoint presentation and what we've accomplished to date and where we are now and some possible changes that may be coming your way in the near future. So this afternoon we had a business outreach meeting for those businesses along the corridor there. And the mayor asked us to set that up last week. And we invited local businesses, West Tech Construction, Wallace Engineering. And some of the businesses that were at the meeting were Neater's Cafe, the Flower Shop, Corner Cupboard, Your Town Chimney, Highway Fuel, and the Knitting Shop. I think there were some more there too that slipped my mind right now, but
33 RSVPs?
yeah, we had 33 RSVPs, so quite a few people were there today. Some of the issues we discussed today were, they thought that there were some narrow lanes things, I think, with the temporary traffic control. It got narrow in spots at times, so West Tech is gonna look into that and just make sure that traffic control is in shape. And we have those lane widths that we need. They wanted some more businesses are open signs. And Wes, here with Wallace Engineering, just sent out an email today ordering 4 more of those. The school district was concerned with Washougal River Road and E Street, the radius there, and with the project, we will be moving those radiuses out, so the turning movements will improve there. So we talked a little bit about that. Talked about some night hours, maybe having West Tech come in at night, which we don't think will be cost effective, and West Tech mentioned that as well. It'd be a substantial change, so not feasible at this point. And then Councilman Costin brought up Shop Local Initiative, which I thought was a great idea. And we're actually looking into checking with the port. Probably tomorrow I'll have Mickey check with the port to see if we can maybe use their reader board there off of SR 14, and just to let everybody know that businesses are open, and we'll probably put out some more larger signs as well. The mayor sent me an email late today, and we'll work on that as well. So overall, I think it was a really positive meeting, and great opportunity, great outreach opportunity for those businesses that are being affected in the pocketbook, for sure. So are there any questions about the meeting this afternoon before we move on to the presentation?
One thing, so that everybody's clear, I know Jennifer had brought it up, and I don't think I'd made it completely clear in the emails. There was no cost to the city for the meeting today, and there won't be for further ones as well. It was nice being able to do them in one of the restaurant facilities that can hold that number of people. I would say probably 75% of the folks ordered lunch. There were actually, I got there early at 12:30, and there were people that were already there then. I think other than just a very small number, most everybody stuck around to the end, and I know the restaurant got a number of lunches that they probably wouldn't have gotten today off of that. So we will kind of move those around, but again, there's no cost to the city for that. We're not picking up the lunches for folks there or anything else. Even staff purchase their own, so.
One question, the 2 entities you mentioned that came out, Wallace Engineering and West Tech, will they be charging us for the additional time coming out to speak to the business owners?
No, because that's all, they're folks that are already here.
Yeah, part of their scope is public outreach.
Mm-hmm. So that's not billable hours? Or is it billable hours?
Maybe Wes could speak to that, but I think part of their billable hours goes to that outreach and that.
Yeah, I mean, typically, from a construction manager standpoint, that's part of what we do from the scope, is both to manage what the contractor themselves is doing, but also manage the project, which on a high impact project like this is very heavily involved with the public. Generally, the conversations and phone calls and things, when I am coordinating with the public, I have been billing. It's within our scope, and I think it's an adequate part, and it's a necessity, definitely, to keep them informed as best we can and try to keep them in the loop, because most of the time it seems like that's what they're most needing, just not to be kind of left in the dark.
I guess not over and above the original budgeted amount.
Correct. And the number of these meetings we're planning for the future?
Likely monthly, you know, as we really, today was trying to roll out as much information as we could. We'll probably, in the next week or so, try and capsulize some of that so that we can get it out to some of the folks that weren't able to make it there. And then from here on out, really, as you know, as the summer season starts to get in, more people are out, more people are moving, that type of stuff too. So now to try and, one, be reactive and a little bit proactive to what any business concerns are and bring those to the group as a whole, but also be able to give them updates on a more timely basis as far as what the schedules are and what they're gonna be seeing in the next month, that type of stuff, which was part of today's discussion as well. It's not necessarily where the project is now, but what's coming.
Right,
So-
right. Well, I've noticed that, especially with the sidewalks, they have, gone around a lot of existing buildings, and they're, they're trying, I think they're trying to work with the business owners to not have to have them tear down existing structures as much as possible. That's the impression that I'm getting, which I'm really pleased to see.
I think the only thing that we've had so far that I know of are a couple of signage issues where we had signages that were dropped in the right of ways, that type of stuff that need to be relocated. Have there been any other pieces really that had to be designed through something?
Other than just utilizing some of the city's existing right of way that may not have been used, there's been a lot of input for property owners as far as reducing their parking space in front of their residence. But the simple explanation of, well, technically it's not your property, it's generally alleviated a lot of their concerns. They just didn't know. They'd always assumed that it was. And that's been probably the number one concern that we've had.
I thought it was, today's meeting I thought was fairly positive. It sounds like there are a lot of businesses that are talking with the contractors and the subcontractors and that type of stuff on a regular basis. And if they've got some issues or some questions, they're already touching base, so. Dave, any?
No, I would agree. I think the folks that came were engaged. They had good questions. Some of it, I think, was based out of maybe not having all the information or understanding some of the rationale behind the city's decisions from months and years ago. And I think they were appreciative of hearing some of that information. Took furious notes, some different ideas. So I think it was very productive. And I think in hindsight, we probably wish that we would have done maybe one of these at least proactively on our own a little earlier. I think that's a lesson for us.
Well, I think that the public outreach part was kind of left to the former administration. We did a whole lot of that last year. It would have been good to maybe do it again, just to kind of give a different perspective and that sort of thing. My next question has to do with Hathaway Crossing. When will that be up and ready to go?
Currently, we're in a little bit of a delay with CPU. As part of the project, they're either relocating or rebuilding some of their heavy transmission lines. And by law, they weren't able to touch those between November and March, basically the winter months, to avoid disruptions in service. So from my conversations with their engineer a week ago, they're starting to plan that work. And once they relocate their poles, they'll reconstruct their lines. With that area in particular, they have to raise them up significantly from where they're at. That's why only one of the signal poles is up at the moment. The other one is in direct conflict with one of their service crossings. So we're kind of on hold to put in that extra, or that second pole until they move their lines, at which point the subcontractor can continue work there.
And those, that area, we've got not only the warning signs, the hazard lights over the crosswalk as well. We still have new speed limit signs to go in and the flashing lights for those ones, in which case those that are out there will be uprooted and taken to one of the other school zones and be utilized in that area as well. So all that kind of flows through in that piece in there.
Okay.
Wes, do you want to mention real quick, I know it was mentioned in the meeting today, we had the one letter to the editor that talked about the landscape water lines and the excessive cost of putting all that in and all that kind of stuff. Do you want to speak to that a little bit as far as?
All for the irrigation.
Yeah.
Generally with plant establishment, we always install irrigation. Mainly without it, you run a real high risk of plant survival. So generally with the irrigation, it stays in effect and Public Works generally maintains it for 3 to 5 years until those plants truly, take root essentially. And so that's typically the way we do it to ensure that the money that you're spending on those plants is gonna stay. It's not gonna die off, and there's not gonna be significant amounts of replacement. Essentially, with a lot of the landscaping that we're doing, we're picking native water quality species to help treat stormwater as well. So they're kind of vital to that wet weather and our stormwater plan essentially.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's just start
update, a lot of these are just pictures to give you guys kind of an idea of where we've been, what we've been doing, kind of give some extra detail on that as well. So currently, the project was awarded and began construction in mid-October, October 18th. And our phasing plan with this was for the contractor kind of focus on the west side of Washougal River Road first, mainly to utilize, one of our funding agencies had an actual timeline with when we needed to build our funding out, and it was strictly related to the sidewalk improvements. So we focused on the area that wasn't as heavily entailed with utilities, the west end. So to date, primarily all of the concrete surfaces and hardscapes, curb, gutter, sidewalk, driveways, approaches have all been completed. I tried to find some pictures that are in the same area, but you can see they're kind of looking different directions. These two particulars in particular are in front of Washougal Flowers. And with any of these pictures, feel free to interrupt me if you have specific questions.
I have a specific question.
Okay.
Sorry. Mailboxes. I noticed it's missing. Will there be a new one put in, or how's that gonna work?
And the post office elected to go to centralized box units. So they're locking, in this particular case, this mailbox will serve Washougal Flowers, the church, and also the Radio Shack. They'll be kind of set back. In most cases, they were put within the postal service's kind of maximum distance to try to lump those properties together, mainly for the reasoning to try to keep their carriers from having to make so many stops along East Street. If we can kind of lump 6 or 8 of those residences together without creating too much of a distance for people to move to get their mail. That was their main focus.
And how were the business owners with that?
I believe Lee had he stopped by door to door to at least hand out a letter that they were doing this, and from my conversations with him, he got pretty positive feedback. I think the locking box makes a big difference to a lot of people. They don't have to worry about that so much. That is definitely one advantage. There's a few people who showed concern just with, it's not right out in front of my house now. But nothing has ever come back to me that's been a lot of opposition towards it. A couple more sidewalk pictures. This one's kind of the same that was on the cover. The plantings that are missing, should be scheduled to go in kind of mid-April. Within the contract, there's a specific time frame that they can't plant. Mainly, it's never a good idea to plant during freezing weather, so they're kind of delayed on that a little bit before they can button up that section of the project. All of our stormwater facilities on the west end are complete, which is a combination of utilizing existing right-of-way to put in water quality swales, meant to treat. It's a cheaper form than a standard conveyance system, and we had the available right-of-way to do that. So if you during some of the wet rain events that we've had, you may have noticed some of those are filling up. Generally, they're designed to drain at a specific rate, both for the water quality standpoint, as well as for the plant life that's in them. And then all of that system has an overflow with it to utilize the existing dry wells that the existing catch basins were using for infiltration. The work that's been going on in progress has transitioned to the east side of Washougal River Road. Currently, they are installing a water line, which is mainly located on the north side of the road. We've switched traffic to the south side, basically one lane in each direction, to give the contractor the ability to work as efficiently as possible. But a lot of the drive to do that was also a cost savings. We had a significant number of flagging hours associated with it, thinking worst case scenario, if the contractor basically would change traffic configurations temporarily every day and have to flag both ends. We pay for those hours by the hour by contract, so allowing them to do this has minimized the amount of extra flagging that they would need outside of the flaggers that we kind of have posted out there more for a safety standpoint to spot trucks, equipment, and that sort of thing. So it has impacted traffic a little bit, but the other advantage to taking the route that the contractor has chosen is it allows us to keep traffic in the same configuration for longer periods of time outside of trying to switch them around and get them used to weaving in and out cones and from our standpoint, it's always safer and easier to understand for motorists if we keep it consistent. So, all the mainline storm has been installed currently, so all of our structures, which are mainly in the center of the road, for an access for public works staff to maintain, as well as we have treatment units that are used in lieu of any sort of bioswale, which is what we were able to utilize on the west end. Our water line improvements are underway. They should be finishing up with mainline installation within the next week and a half, at which point the contractor plans to pull back and start installing the water services, both to the north and to the south, at which time they'll test, make their connections, and start putting the new water line into operation, and kind of block by block, blocking out the existing, and we can abandon that. And at that point, once the water line is live, they can finish their lateral connections for all the stormwater, mainly all the new catch basins that we're putting in on each side of the road.
Isn't the guy in the orange coat, is that Lee Fitzpatrick?
That would be Lee.
And I just want to make sure everybody understands that we've got a guy standing there looking in the hole every day. And he's out there every day, every work day.
And Lee's been a great resource for us. We greatly appreciate his involvement.
Well, he's got some institutional knowledge about why things are where they are at too, doesn't he?
Yeah, he knows how it needs to be built, and he's not afraid to tell you if he acts differently. So, but all in all, he's been great to have out there, both from a contractor relationship, and he's great with the existing system too, which with the age of the water line out there, there's a lot of unknowns. So he's been very vital, honestly, in keeping extra costs down, looking ahead and seeing with the existing system anyway what conflicts we may run into. So. All right, let's go back one. And just for general where we're going, once they finish the water line, they'll jump to essentially constructing all of the north side curb and gutter, as well as sidewalk, driveways, button-up restorations behind driveways, at which point we will pave back the existing road. And part of what we're going to discuss here at Mid-It is potential ideas for restoring the existing asphalt or possibly reconstructing it, at which point, either way that happens to go, we're going to basically flip-flop the traffic to the work on the south side. So we'll bring everybody one lane in each direction to the north while they construct curb, gutter, and there's a few retaining walls that go in on the south side, and we'll finish up with the sidewalk and basically progress down the road. In April, scheduled is to fully reconstruct Washougal River Road and East Street intersection. The extents are about 150 feet west of the intersection to just about 18th Street, and then from the bridge up about 200 feet north of the intersection. It'll be a full depth reconstruction, base rock, asphalt, at which time the remaining conduits and wiring for the signal will be installed, and shortly after that they'll be able to kind of bring the traffic signal into operation. I'm still working with the subcontractor to see how we can configure turning on the new traffic signal without, or with the existing striping layout, and making sure that everything's clear to the public. Are there any other specific questions towards kind of where we're going as far as schedule?
You know, well, actually not really schedule. I mean, maybe you can talk about it later. Something that I took from that meeting today, took out is the information on the traffic light, because that is a real long delay there, that traffic signal, and it seemed like that was echoed throughout the members of the community. They could deal with the cones and the one-way traffic, and, you know, but the sitting for 5 minutes at the intersection drove them crazy. And then you indicated it had to do with the age of the current signal, and so could you just, I know that's not really scheduled, but could you just speak for a minute on that?
Yeah, there has been a lot of concern with the timing of the existing signal that's in operation. When we started doing our utility improvements, we cut through the wire loop detectors that are in the pavement. Essentially, they're an electronic mechanism that lets the signal know how many people are queuing up, so it can change the progression of the signal to accommodate different traffic in different directions. But once we cut through them to go through with the utilities, you have to go to more of a standard timing. And from my conversations with the maintenance guys at WashDOT that manage the signal, due to the age of that existing controller, they only have a few set programs that it'll operate off of. that are standard timing. So at that point, they'd come out and try to assess what the best timing program was for basically the flows of traffic that we were getting. And unfortunately, the timing does seem a little bit long, and it is, you wait a little extra time. But unfortunately, that's probably the best program that we have at this point until the new traffic signal's put up. So in case you guys have been getting a lot of questions with that one.
I have one question about that. Is it possible, I don't know whether this controller can do it, but I know that sometimes traffic lights run different timing at a different time of day. So for example, if you could have the northbound traffic off of Washougal River Road get a longer duration from 3:30 to 5:30, and then northbound get a longer duration from 6:30 to 9 a.m., that would help.
I will contact Washout again and see what, I'd ask them to come out and take a closer look at it. The last time there was a concern, and that was the response I got, pretty much what I reiterated to you guys. I'll see if they have any other options, or if there's anything, you know, that they can do, just because it is a long queuing time.
And the traffic is so asymmetric morning to evening, it just flip-flops.
John?
Kind of think I know where Paul's going with that, but the way it was arranged before was after a certain time in the evening, it just went to first come, first served. So if you were the first one there, you would go. Can we at least get that back?
Cut all the lines down below.
Yeah,
There's no
the-
sensors?
So,
No?
Yeah, there's no treadle plate anymore. There's no way to detect whether the car is there or not.
but is it, well, and I guess it goes then to what Paul said, is then can we, you know, at a certain part in the evening, then all of a sudden it just flips to a shorter exchange? Because there's no reason for me to sit there for 2 minutes at 9 o'clock at night. I mean, it just, it doesn't make any sense.
And I agree.
When will the new traffic light come online?
We won't be able to put that into operation until after the intersection's reconstructed.
Okay.
So we're probably looking at least a couple, 3 months.
All right, yeah.
So you got that scheduled in April, how duration is that? A month long, 2
They
months
have,
long?
they currently have it shown in their master schedule for 6 weeks.
Can you also, Wes, when you're talking with them again, the conversation that we had today in regard to that third set of signals on there, can we just double check with them that those things absolutely positively have to be on before we go in and do something different to them so that they don't confuse people?
Okay.
Primarily, you said that's just redundancy, so that if one goes out, you got the other one.
From,
Crazy.
yeah, from my discussion with the traffic engineer on this project, that's Washout's new standard, and it is just a redundancy in case one of the bulbs goes out, you're not leaving, I guess, traffic with no light. At least there's that redundancy, and they can keep traffic moving.
On the R arm though, is it set up as a third lane? Does it look like a third lane when you look at it, or is it right next to the other one, or I haven't looked at it that closely?
It's set up, that's originally why my question arose to the traffic engineer, that their spacing is also dictated by the MUTCD, as is everything traffic related, so
I mean, that it looks like a third lane.
it almost does, correct?
Yeah, I would have a serious concern if we start having people thinking that that bike lane is a turn lane and have vehicle traffic start going into what clearly is a bike lane. Seems a little silly. But if we gotta leave them that way, I'm sure that we can figure out something to remove some.
So some of the potential changes that Jim had referenced, one of which is we've been noticing that we're having some pretty significant failure with the existing pavement. This picture was taken from design approximately 2 years ago, and you can notice kind of the excessive crack sealing that we've done in the past, which is mainly subgrade failure, is generally why we see that, an excessive amount of water getting underneath the pavement surface and causing a real moisture-sensitive soil to pump and cause cracking. It's been essentially exacerbated from both postponed maintenance with the projected East Street project coming through, and also manipulating the traffic a little bit more heavily to allow for different construction activities and configurations, primarily using those outside lanes. From my observations, it's generally been traffic has avoided those outside lanes, both due to kind of catch basin, differences in grade, as well as just the overall ride smoothness of it. As we've pushed through looking into our pavement analysis for design, it was anticipated that some of these worse areas in the outside lanes had about a 3-year expected design life left in them if kind of more maintenance heavy projects weren't planned for. So one thing we've done during design is try to locate a lot of our utilities to alleviate any of the subgrade failures that we're having here. So this particular alignment is right where the new water line's going in. So we can remove a lot of those damaged soils, but also kind of build it back up with rock and try to kind of double dip almost. You know, take care of the existing soil as well as install our water line. We've also had a lot of scenarios where when Northwest Natural came through and put their trenches in, they're causing additional trench patching, which is further creating issues just with ride smoothness, and as well as the permanent trench patches that they're doing to get a firm sock-headed edge and pave back. They've had a lot of issues just with the edges of it ripping out, and you can kind of see that this would be more of their final state for where they wanted to be. And they've been off the project, but it's continuing to deteriorate. So one of the, with the project, the current proposal has been to do a micro seal. And this was mainly chosen as the minimal recommendation based on the pavement report for the project, and chosen strictly due to budget constraints with the project and to keep the project moving and within budget. It's expected that you'll get a 2 to 4 year design life with this particular type of surface treatment. And the reflective cracking that we've seen, the alligator cracking, will continue to propagate up after those 2 years and require additional city maintenance. But it also won't improve any of the ride smoothness, because the important thing to notice with this project, with all the water laterals, service laterals, and with all the storm trenches, we have to basically trench perpendicular across the lane of travel. And I think all of us, whenever you've driven over an old utility trench, there's always definitely a bump from secondary compaction. All it really has to do with is the asphalt continues to settle as traffic continues to drive on it. There isn't much you can do to avoid it. So from a ride smoothness, and generally that's public perception after the end of the project, is if we come through, they know that the utilities went in, but as long as their facilities continue to function, they're noticing what they're driving on, and that's what their opinion, at least the road service, would be. Within that micro seal was built into the current contract. It's approximately $160,000. So with our additional trenching, we're also noticing that a lot of the edges of the pavement are continuing to ravel away, both due to underground rock boulders that the contractors have to remove to install the utilities, as well as just subgrade failures as we've been going along. You'll notice that the crack kind of alongside the trench there is mainly degraded existing surfacing, but by the time you put that trench in, there's only such a small width in between them that there's not a lot of structural hold to it, and so both with construction traffic and public traffic, it's continuing to fail at a quicker rate. Similar pictures showing this same scenario.
Question. So in the original bid of the $160,000 that was proposed for the micro seal, this is going to stay like this?
Essentially, we will permanent pave everything back, saw cut to the limits that we can to get to firm pavement and pave back, but it will be a trench patch. The micro seal is the same, I guess, surfacing that they just did on Washougal River Road up the street, so it's a real thin overlay that's mainly meant to seal the roadway so that water can't get into the subgrade, further impact the guess, the quality and the structural life of the pavement. So the look of it would be significantly different. It'd be more like what's out on River Road leading up to the bridge. But underneath the pavement, yeah, you have restored trench lines, but you still have the existing pavement that's in a very low expected design. So working with staff and TIB, which is one of the main contributors on the project, we've been discussing different options to possibly restore the surfacing to a higher extent to achieve a much higher design life. So the two options that have been recommended based on the pavement report that was done during design and with TIB consideration has been to do, in lieu of the microsurfacing, to do a 2-inch grinded inlay, which essentially remove 2 inches of pavement and pave it back on the full west end of the project, which would be basically from the rebuild all the way to the project limits. Your expected life with that would be 15 to 18 years. There would be some minor reflective cracking. It appears that the pavement on the west end is in significantly better shape than what we've been experiencing on the east side of the project. And the other recommendation was to do a 6-inch grinding inlay, which is essentially a removal of the entire asphalt surface on the west end, or on the east end, and then to pave back a 6-inch section after regrading and recompacting, which would give you, again, approximately a 15 to 18-year life of the road. And it would alleviate essentially any chance, or most chances, of reflective cracking. Reflective cracking is mainly caused from the pavement underneath whatever surfacing you're putting on slowly coming up. Similar to sidewalk cracks, they continue to move up to the surface to relieve stress. With that, we put together, and in coordination with TIB, kind of come up with where we would be additional cost-wise. The total cost of the improvements to do the 2-inch grinded inlay on the west end and the 6-inch inlay on the east end is approximately $650,000. With professional service added in, there will be, I think the contractor's anticipating, if this goes through, an additional 2 to 3 weeks of construction time, because there is a lot of asphalt to put down, which professional services would cover all the QC. We are under federal regulations with this project due to the different funding sources. So we have to follow state and federal regulations, which is pretty significant, as well as time and kind of coordination to get to the point that we are now, as well as the final designs to give the contractor enough information to build it. The TIB contribution, they have verbally agreed to $498,000 to complete those improvements, which would put the city additional cost at $156,000. And I know Jim has put in significant thoughts into potential funding sources, as well as Jennifer. I might hand that over to you to discuss if you're okay with it.
Sure, so yeah, we checked with our attorneys, Foster Pepper, and it doesn't constitute a cardinal change, is their legal opinion. So we haven't got final approval from TIB yet, but we're expecting to do that probably next week or the week after. But as far as leveraging the TIB match and using reserves from the city, I think we've talked to Jennifer about using some of the reserves for that. There's also a piece where we have some trench restoration for the water line that went in. So I think from the 406 fund, that could go directly to the bond that y'all talked about earlier, and then we could utilize those funds possibly. And there's also a possibility of using some of the REIT money, real estate excise tax, for pavement management. And any other thoughts on that, Jennifer, as far as reserves or Dave?
We would end up bringing it obviously before you and let you make the ultimate decision, but we do have the $150,000 in the REIT fund. That's pretty much the entire road maintenance fund. So that would be the consequence of using that funding source, would be that any other maintenance that needs to be done throughout the rest of the year, we wouldn't have funding for. So that's why we were thinking it might be a good use of reserves for that very insignificant amount to be able to get a great finished product. because we don't want the end result to unravel after just a couple years.
Yeah.
Definitely want East Street to be functional for many, many, many years.
Yeah,
So-
this is the improvement we need for sure. We need to make this change. I could just let you know that that pavement is in poor condition, the base is in poor condition, and we're not gonna have a good finished product with a micro seal moving forward, so.
Jim, can you remind us of the savings in the contract
Sure.
bid and award, and what the engineer's estimate was, which is what our anticipated expenses for the project was going to be?
Yeah, thank you, David. Yes, engineer's estimate was $6,100,000, and we came in at $4,540,000, so 1.5 under original engineer's estimate.
So if the economy hadn't been such as it is, and the bidding climate hadn't become so favorable for contracting agencies, not so favorable for contractors, we would have gotten not any of this. We would have gotten what is a cause of concern for the 6.1 million. And with the bidding climate that we've had, you could say that we are spending $156,000 of reserve, but the reality is we would have been spending that and lots more, 10 times that, 1.5 million, if this project had come in at engineer's estimate and we were prepared to do that, and had value engineered it already down to what we thought was going to be 6.1. We thought it was going to be higher than that a couple years ago, and these types of improvements had been engineered out. So as we've been approaching this, we've been looking at, and I think there had been some very preliminary conversations with the council about how fantastic it was that that bid came in so low, and did that open up potential opportunities perhaps for us to enhance the project and build back in some of the things that had been taken out. This, from the staff and from our consultants' perspective, is a very critical element to a successful project. And the fact that the TIB is stepping up to fund $500,000 out of $650,000 is very significant. And so we're strongly recommending that the council consider the use of reserves. That's the technical formality that it would take. We'd have to bring a supplemental budget to you, and you'd have to make that appropriation. Out of general fund reserves, it could come down, as Jim mentioned. We could leverage potentially some utility dollars for the part that is impacted by the utility restoration work. We'll continue to work those. But the window of decision timing for this, in order to continue the professional work and to get the information to the contractor so that it doesn't impact the overall time frame of the project, is closing for us. We need to have a decision here within the next month, or how much time do we have to make a decision?
Yes. Yeah, as soon as we get here back from TIB, as soon as that's official, then
Right.
we bring something forward again.
So I know that we're in work session now, and this is not a forum where council makes any formal decisions, but we would be very interested in any feedback that you have about this notion.
Dave, I can see that we need to do this. I think we'd be remiss if we didn't. How we do it is a concern to me. Two questions. One, what do we have in reserves right now? I understand we have around 3.5 or 3.6 million, of which we need 1.75 million to smooth out our cash flow during the year, which leaves us about 1.75 to 1.8 in reserves. That's almost 10% of our reserves. So, second question, how would you feel about funding this out of the $150,000 that we have in the street budget, and then bringing back every single project that you want to do for the rest of the year on the streets to the council? Does that become an overwhelming administrative burden?
Well, the 150 is a general pavement management line item. and it's not specified to any particular, we're gonna do this or that. I don't know if our pavement management program is programmed yet for this summer. Is that programmed already?
No, it's not programmed for this summer yet. We feel, you know, in talking to, you know, some of the operations personnel and Will Noonan, that the maintenance that would be required out here, I mean, we would love to take some of the money out of reserves to fund this project and still maintain our maintenance budget, that $150,000, because there are a lot of streets and roads out there that we need to maintain. You know, we need to keep up with it, but,
I mean, a mechanism that could work is, without any supplemental appropriation, would be to leverage that $150,000 that's already appropriated for roads and use it on the roads as part of this project. I think we could do that kind of administratively, of course, with your knowledge and consent, but it wouldn't require a budget amendment. And then we could develop our normal road maintenance program and bring that back and have you supplementally appropriate funds for that, and you would see specifically what we were gonna be doing.
I'll tell you what my concern is. Our reserves are down to the point now where they're problematic, in my opinion. And I am resistant to the idea that it's just a little bit of money coming out of reserves. That's 10%. 10% is not insignificant. I'm resistant to the use of reserves because we've done so much of that in the last several years. So I see that we need to do this. I'm really concerned about just taking that chunk out of reserves, all in one big chunk. It just doesn't, it grabs at the very fiber of my being. I don't want to do that.
Does that balance that you just quoted, Jennifer, does that include the surplus from 10?
It might be, I don't have, we had a surplus, we fine-tuned the numbers the past couple of days, and so the surplus for 2010 was $350,000. We got some last-minute larger maintenance items that we didn't know about in finance that we made sure to put in the proper year, and according to state auditors' indirect cost allocation plan, we trued it up and did the actual cost versus budgeted costs, and so that made the deficit, or not deficit, excuse me, the surplus a little smaller than the original 400,000. So I think the number's closer to 4.2.
When you roll that in there?
When you roll that in.
Sean, but in current surplus?
Correct.
Right, because we
In
ended
surplus of just general funds.
Right.
we
Not-
ended 2010.
Not touching the ER&R, not touching
Right.
the IT, not touching EMS
Correct.
reserves, that type of stuff, just
Right.
general reserves.
About 4.2, and this would come out of the general reserves.
Correct.
And then you have your council policy that you alluded to, which is 1.8,
We have 1.8.
so that takes the,
I'm comfortable with the number 4.2 as a starting point, but I'm still concerned about this idea, you know, we reach for those reserves every time, first choice. I'm concerned about that.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to be cognizant of, though, is when we come forward and asking about the reserves, making sure that they're in capital projects and not something that's an ongoing process where we've got a leak going, literally. One of the things to keep in mind, though, as well, and it's an option that takes care of 50% of it from the utility. We're figuring that there's, basically, the conversation was, if we weren't redoing E Street this year, but we were redoing the water main that's down there and all the work that's associated to it, on and on and on, what portion of this would we have done that is utility-based, that would have come out of the utility, period? And indications are that it's about half of that 156,000. So theoretically, if you wanted to, bless you,
Bless you.
you could potentially put half of that 156 to the utilities and put them under the bond program that we've got now paying for capital projects. Keep in mind, as you do that, that means that we're now paying interest on that over a 20-year period, so there's some portion of that in there. Hang on just a second, Jeff. Rod?
You have 156 up here, but wasn't it 150 for the slurry? wasn't it
Yes.
$150,000 for the slurry?
These are additional costs. above-
Yeah, these are strictly additional costs.
And I understand that, but where was the 150 coming for the slurry?
The
That
REAP
was-
fund.
That was deducted from the total project, meaning if we combine, I don't have the exact numbers, but there's about $400,000 worth of work items that are removed from this total amount that are saved by going to this option as opposed to doing the trench patching. So those have already been deducted out of your totals here. And the micro seal is one of them, as well as all the permanent road or trench restoration.
Because I think everybody at the table here feels like this is something that needs to be done, where those dollars come from. But that's why I was thinking 150 for the slurry seal or 156 for this piece of it. But,
So it's a lot more.
Yeah, I like Councilman Shoemaker's idea of taking that out of the street budget and coming back with additional. But also too, let's say we use, we're not even gonna use the whole 150,000 if we add in those other revenue streams that we have into the process. So I mean, we're not talking about totally wiping out their road budget.
As long as you're okay with those going into the bond and paying on those over some period of time. There's certainly a cost to doing that versus utilizing funds that we have in the check.
And I guess my hesitation is we've already been talking about, the next round of cuts for the next budget. And we're talking about, some of the things that are gonna really have to probably get the axe this time around. And so, anything we can do to hold on to those reserves, I think, and to be tight-fisted with it, I think is prudent.
Engineering question, what kind of shape is the base in? Do you have to do base work?
In minor locations, we'll have to, the pavement report specifies that everything but the outside lanes, the base is in pretty good shape, mainly due to, we've seen that there's a secondary layer of asphalt from when they basically raised the road, rebuilt it, and that's acted as more or less of a seal to all the existing subgrade, so it hasn't been a problem. The outside lanes is not the same scenario, and over time, just lack of being able to fund crack sealing projects on the staff end, it's allowed surface water to continue to seep in and destroy what's there, and that's essentially those few pictures that show the real alligated pieces. That's a lot of what you're seeing, and that's been coupled by the existing drainage structures out there not functioning perfectly. There's been some unique systems that were installed back when the road was widened that are not acting properly anymore, and it's caused significant puddling during bigger rain events, and that's further exacerbated the problem.
And if you didn't do it, and you kept basically the pavement problem so that you're gonna have to, what, slurry seal it or micro seal it every 4 years ad infinitum and
Yeah, and I think at least on the east side, we'd be looking at a reconstruct at some point in 4 to 5 years. And I mean, you could probably speak to that more than I could, Wes, but it's in pretty bad shape, especially with all those utility cuts through there. So I mean, we're looking at a deferred huge cost in a few years.
When it would cost more to do it.
Exactly.
Well, mobilization, they're here
yeah,
versus.
mobilization is a huge piece of the cost too. And then one other comment, the economic guru who spoke at, and he's more a talk radio kind of guy, who spoke at the CREDC luncheon last week. His basic recommendation to individual investors was borrow everything that you can borrow at a fixed rate, because you will never see interest rates as low as they are today, looking into the future. And spend it on capital improvements, because those prices will go up. They're as low as they're going to be for a long time. And try to eliminate your maintenance costs. That was his recommendation, whether you were talking about a company like Sharp Electronics or a corner grocery store. And also make those investments into, what he called it, inflation-protected capital, which would be real estate and some other things. But as far as we're concerned, it just seems to me that if we can do this for less, now for a whole lot less, than we're gonna have to do it. We're gonna have to do a major job in 4 years if we don't do it now. And the equipment's all there, the contractor's all deployed, prices are low, interest rates are low.
To my eyes, it looks like it's essential, particularly with them going across the pavement like they did for the utilities. That has put additional stress on already crumbling roadway. I mean, the edges, obviously, those have been crumbling for quite some time, and you know, it just can't be left as it is, in my opinion. As far as financing is concerned, I'd be curious to know what the other plans are for any other road projects for this year. I don't know. We're already into March, and the dry season's coming up. Did you have some things on the list already?
For the bond, you mean? or-
No, I mean in addition to
Pavement.
this.
Budget.
Pavement management?
Mhm.
You know, we don't have, it is budgeted for this year, but we don't have the roads and the road segments that we are going to slurry seal and grind inlay this year. Actually, we had a grinder from the county last year that we're not gonna be able to get this year. But we would like to do some slurry, some chip seal. There's a lot of chip seal streets in some of the lower income neighborhoods that's all you can do is chip seal it. You know, unless you wanna reconstruct the road, the only way to maintain it is put another chip seal on it. So we're getting to the point where we have to do that as well. So that's important as well, but we don't wanna get to the point where we don't do anything out on East Street, cause the maintenance costs would be tremendous if we don't do anything out there, and we'll end up spending
We're
money
already
out
putting
there.
out our citizens and our businesses, and we have so much effort going into this. I really do support doing something that's more long-term and, you know, making the improvements under the ground as deep as we can afford to go, in my opinion.
So basically, when you're making your list of roads to work on, you basically are doing it based on which ones took the worst wear and tear over the winter? Is that where you hit first?
It will be in the next month to 2 months as you've got all the rains coming down to puke up whatever's already
So, I mean,
frozen
a
up.
lot of that's just the unknown factor. I mean, we could have one of our streets go through a sinkhole. I mean, it's, you know,
Again,
yeah, so.
we had one of those last year that nobody knew it was there until that weekend when it went, so, and that thing just got bigger and bigger.
Historically, we've had a $400,000 annual road maintenance budget, 3-4.
That was, when I first started here as the street storm manager, we had a $400,000 budget. We started with thin overlays, thick overlays. We did 32nd Street. That got cut down to 150,000. And so we're just, it is tough to be proactive. I mean, we do have surface ratings that we do. We go out and score roads, basically, and we try to basically have a pavement management program that hits the roads that need to be hit first, depending on what kind of treatment you need, but
Decided.
Yeah,
we're more
I guess,
reactive,
yeah, I
I
guess
guess
what
is
I'm trying
what
to
I'm
get my mind around this regard is, let's say we go the route that Councilman Shoemaker has suggested, and you have your program in place for the summer, but that program gets interrupted by some very serious needs on some streets that you weren't projecting or seeing. What's the turnaround time? And if we've got 2 weeks before the council gets back together to make a motion to give you that money, because the money's not there because we used it for this, I mean, is that, how do we make that work if we're in an emergency situation where a road has gotta be taken care
Well,
of?
if you're truly in an emergency situation, if we've got a water line that blows out, that takes out half of a block, that type of stuff, of actual roadway, that type of thing, I've got the ability to order the repairs done and then bring it to you at
Okay.
the first opportunity,
Okay.
all that type of stuff under an emergency
I just wanna make sure there
scenario.
were safeguards in place. We-
Yeah.
move in that direction.
I think one of the things to keep in mind, as we go through this discussion, you know, we talk about the road maintenance and the 150 and that type of stuff. But there's probably, Jim, I'm gonna guess, having talked to, yeah. Who's our lead?
Will?
No.
Kelly?
Kelly, sorry, a little mind blank. There's probably half of that you start forming up in the spring as far as projects, but there's probably half of that money that isn't a project per se, that's more maintenance, repair, stuff that just comes along that, I mean, I think.
That's fairly accurate, yeah.
I think one of the things that we've probably all heard from Kelly a number of times over the last couple of years of how they do that stuff, I mean, they can make that 150 stretch an awful long ways.
Right.
And it's not something where they're trying to spend the money that's there and make sure and go through it all, that type of stuff. They're really looking at what they can do and what they can do well with that money, given the fact that they're a 2-member, 3-member crew, and trying to get by in there. So one of the things I'd be hesitant on, is cutting that back so far to where they've got something that truly they know needs to be done, but in our process, we've got to work through a 2-week, 3-week reallocation process in order to free up the money for them to buy some more Band-Aids.
Yeah,
Essentially.
one thought to think of, and is kind of how I'm looking at this, is these are 2 separate contexts that we're talking about. A community that runs streets just has a routine maintenance budget, and you just gotta take care of your streets. And it's not really a road project per se, it's not a capital improvement, it's just power washing your deck, or, you know, repainting your house, or whatever that maintenance that you have to do to keep your stuff working. And then there's capital investment, and a maintenance project becomes a capital investment when it's a rebuild, like one of these suggestions that we're making, where you yank a bunch of it out and you really like then it's like re-siding your house or re-roofing, and it's really a capital investment. So the 2 expenditures that we're talking about, the general maintenance and this capital investment, are kind of 2 different animals. But we fund roads out of our general fund, so the conversation commingles. My advice would be, as much as possible, to, in your mind at least, separate the funding and how they interact as much as you can between the capital and the maintenance. And it is an ongoing challenge, though, in these times to want to defer maintenance in order to do the things that you need to do, because you're looking at that total bottom line. So I think at the end of the day, it's a question of prioritization on reserves and what is the appropriate balances to maintain, and when things come up, is it the appropriate thing to use your reserves for? Is that why you have them? I think if there's ever a time to do it, it is when you have a very significant capital issue like this that comes up, and it's not, let's throw $1 million operationally to survive for a year, which has not been the philosophy of the administration or of this council, of course. And so just some other thoughts as you think about this one.
Molly, you've been very patient.
Well, it seems like this project is essential to the success of the whole East Street project as a whole. It's pretty obvious to me that, you know, you have drivers, pedestrians, businesses that are being enormously inconvenienced. And if our end product is inferior, it's going to doom the future of that whole corridor. So we really need to do this. I just want to kind of wait until I'm firm on where our portion comes from, because I want to make sure that we do get TIB money, and I want to see the signature on the line for that. And then what West Tech, what they're committed you know, what they think it's gonna run at, because I have some concerns that, you know, if the cost of oil keeps increasing, that may impact the cost of the whole project. Because now we're talking about a project that uses a lot of petroleum product. And, but I do think it's important, and it's not really poor planning, it's probably almost too good planning, because I know Trevor a long time ago said they gave ample notification to the utilities to come in and do a lot of that needed work. And he said they weren't even aware of how much work they were gonna come in and do, so.
It's, yeah, and part of it's on us as well. You know, if anybody, Wes had mentioned some of the rocks and that type of stuff that have come out of this project. Rocks is probably a gentle term. If you want to go back behind West Tech's building that they're renting down there and see the mountain of boulders that have come out of there.
So he's sitting on a gold mine, because they'll break them all up and there'll be a lot of gravel, right?
We actually, do we have plans for those? Do you know?
They take them to the Cemex pit and crush them.
Okay. Suzanne wants to get a hold of someone for parks and some things in there, so I said, before they start trucking those out of here, you might want to check into some of those, but keep in mind that there's a little bit of change that we put towards this thing as well, and some of the cuts that are going to be in there by putting that water line in. I mean, you think there's some cross cuts that are in there now. We haven't started hooking up the services yet for that new water line, so all of those are yet to go across to the, from the north side to the south side as well. So we're gonna add to that, but again, it's part of that project that we anticipated being under there to get that new water line in there, so.
That speaks to the legitimacy of using some utility
Utility
funds for some of this project, and the legitimacy of ratepayers footing the bill, even though the ratepayer and the taxpayer are probably one and the same person, but it, you know, it makes sense.
This is the home of the motocross, we might as well have the whoop-de-doo in this here too.
Let's not. Well,
And the other thing, of course, is that you go back 3 or 4 years when we were first having our public meetings on this. The project included pretty much repaving the entire corridor. And we took that out for cost reasons, basically. And now the bids have come in at 25% less than what we expected, and maybe we can put some of that stuff back in that we sharp penciled out so painfully.
well, that could take you into some other discussions. Other questions on this individual item?
So another topic that's been discussed recently as part of the original TIB grant proposal, back when the project was more in a conceptual design, the south side sidewalk between 6th and Washougal River Road was always omitted from this project. It was never basically planned for due to, I believe, both city staff recommendations based on pet trips and kind of where we were with the budget. So one thing that's been in consideration is the possibility of adding in, even if it were piecemeal, to try to interconnect all of the sidewalks and pedestrian accessible routes along the south side between the limits there. So from recent discussions, let me freeze.
So anyway, we've been discussing, you know, lately possible change to include that south side sidewalk. And this would be a separate bidded item off of our small works roster is what we're considering. There are some schedule issues. If we went to a typical change order with the south side sidewalk, we would run into some delays on the project because we'd have to get it to about 90% design with the federal funds and the state funds that are included on the project. But if we went off the small works roster and just put in those pieces that do not currently exist, we would be able to hopefully get under the small works bid allotment of $300,000. We don't have any tight numbers right now, but that's kind of a ballpark of what we're looking at. And all these things we're bringing forward tonight are just to kind of give you a heads up of what could be coming soon, because we will need to get it through fairly quickly if we want to get it into the project. Yes, John?
Could you remind me real quick, who owns that wooded area right there? Is that Permins, or is that the city or railroad, or?
It's all city right away. I believe there's about 30 feet behind the curb, and then the BNSF property is adjacent to it.
Yeah, I think most of that's up in here, John, my understanding is the cities as well, even in the green grassed area. Kind of interesting, I don't think that's one. This signpost you can see on there is the sign that's all covered up now. I don't think that's the C-Tran stop, but it's not much better. The stop is along this pathway, this thing that's right over in here.
And a lot of those folks that live past Permins and past they utilize that.
They utilize that.
And they have no place to walk on this side anyway. It's really a hazard.
Yes, the C-Tran stop is just about where that car is on the road.
Yeah, the sign, they've actually taken the sign down temporarily. Dave?
Did I miss the cost estimate in here?
Whether it's frozen, we can't get it.
Yeah. From a scheduling standpoint, due to the federal obligations that we have with anything that's change ordered into the E Street contract, scheduling becomes the main hindrance. We would need to get to a 90% design to submit to both the state, and in the meantime, we would have to revise the environmental documentation, because we never truly proposed any sort of work being done through this area, south of the curb. And with that, Tribes has a 30-day review time, which is also based on the 90% design. And we get to a point where we're significantly impacting the contractor's schedule, both from cost as well as getting this project done before we get into more of a wet weather scenario, end of October, November, when paving really becomes a very heavy issue. So we've been looking at different opportunities to do, basically truncate that schedule down, and the best available option that we've been looking at is possibly doing a separate project as a small works, and our limitation there is under a $300,000 construction project, so that would be our max dollar amount. And if I could continue through the slides, the preferable option would be all the areas where there's existing grass or native vegetation to put in some sort of ADA compliant accessible route to kind of interconnect the whole facility. And outside of that, depending on where our costs are coming in, it would be to basically break out the portions that we didn't feel were as significant. And maybe it's something that it's from Lacamas Bank to Highway Fuel Car Wash, that section through there, or if there's other pieces in between that could possibly be picked up and do as much as we can to the city's standards, depending on what the extents of what we're truly trying to do.
So there's not a good answer yet to your question, Dave, because we haven't studied it enough to know what the cost scenarios are of all the options, but.
I picked up two things. One, we don't know right now, and the other is it's gonna be expensive. The other thing I was gonna ask is, how about the area from East Street Market up to Washougal River Road?
And that was the other area in question, depending on what our total cost was and what was the priority of areas, because we do have that section of vacant lot through a car company that is on a pretty heavy slope. It's not travelable by any means. That is a potential to address with this type of smaller project.
John?
Bill was going to just remind me of the question I had. Is that, the place where those cars are parked, is that city property?
Right off of the overpass?
I don't know how much right of way we have in there, but yeah, some of that is.
There's about 8 feet from the face of curb to the right-of-way line.
I mean, that corner lot though is ours, right? That belongs to the city?
The
No.
corner lot belongs to the owner of a car company.
Right.
Oh, so the
Yeah.
car company owns that.
We just got right away in there.
Okay. This portion right here, this wooded portion, I don't remember how much wood there is, like, how much of it, that's just scrub brush, or if there's trees and so forth. Do we know the acreage on that at all?
Somebody had that when you were talking about doing that into a park area or doing some landscaping to make that into a little pocket park. There was like 3/4 of an acre or something in total.
Yeah, I'd have to, any idea, Wes, on?
I didn't realize we made that assessment of the area, so, that may have been before I got into this.
Yeah, we were talking about funding and possible ways to fund it, and one of the ideas we had were, which didn't get a lot of traction, but I thought was a great idea, were little pocket parks along the way that we could incorporate into the park system. That in itself right there, though, that piece of property, I don't know how, a sidewalk trail through the woods would be, or, what exactly.
Yeah, I just don't know how much foot traffic and kids and that kind of stuff you want to put closer to railroad, but
Yeah, and
I
I
haven't
haven't
walked it myself
I'm
either.
just talking out of, just up in the air, so.
Dave?
Question. You're gonna have to relocate those phone poles there, the utility lines. Any chance of putting them underground? Is that gonna be overly expensive? Or is this a chance to get some of that done?
Overly expensive would probably be the right word.
Never mind.
Generally,
That's all I need to know. Thank you very much.
This picture is actually, it's a little bit skewed, Dave, because if you actually went down there, depending on where you went with with a pathway of some sort, there's actually, other than I think 2 poles, there's a pretty good amount of space between the curb and the pole in order to get that 5 foot in there, or go to the other side, one of the 2.
Go to the other side may be an option, but the street side is not. I walked that area putting signs out there during the election, and I walked backwards just so I didn't lose my backside to a passing truck while I was doing it.
Yeah. Jennifer?
Yeah, that 3/4 of an acre that you're talking about between the road and the BNSF property, have we ever thought about selling it, surplusing it, just getting rid of it?
I don't know if anybody ever has or not. That was one of the things I mentioned today is, if the city didn't own all this and somebody else did, and you make the improvements and somebody decides they want to build something in there, do we entertain offers to sell that to, I think at some point we've just got to delineate how much property we actually have and where's Burlington Northern's line and all those types of things in there, but it's definitely odd shape, there's no doubt about it. And then you run into the Andersons down there, and they've actually got a pretty good chunk of property down there.
So there's, like Wes mentioned, there are portions there with 30 foot of right of way, so there's substantial right of way through there.
Just, I know you probably had it in the presentation, it was kind of lit on a little bit, funding sources for this, where would those come from, potentially?
Funding sources for this scenario would come completely from the city. Originally, staff had looked at working with TIB because they were interested, but due to the scheduling constraints and getting it into the East Street project, you'd be looking at potentially very significant delays with the East Street project, which would have implications of cost as well. And from TIB's, the conversations that we've had with them, they never fully committed to saying, yes, if you do this, we will help contribute. It was, 1, we're not paying for any sort of design, and 2, when we get hard numbers, we'll see what we can do.
Even though they wanted continuous sidewalks on both sides, all
Yes.
the way down.
I know.
They don't want to go back to their board.
Well, in this late in the game,
In
I
this-
wonder how much money they actually still have uncommitted, so.
Yeah.
I know.
One approach that we talked about a little bit was to, in the ideal world, we would build this principal arterial to our standards. And that would be full curb and gutter and sidewalk on both sides. That's our standard. It was prohibitive, so that's not what was in the project. And we would go out and seek funding for that. When we designed this part, this south side, we'd do the full design for that full meal deal. We'd wait until the next funding cycle. We'd go out and kick the tires with whomever we could and try to get funding to do it. And maybe be successful, maybe not. The problem would be that this nice new pavement section that we place would then be cut to articulate with improvements that we would make. And a year or two after we do our nice new road, we'd go in there and cut our own stripe in it, which would then cause problems down the road. And it just didn't seem to make any sense to do that. And then based on these scheduling issues and the expected life of this pavement, if we do go forward with what we've just been talking about, being about 15 years, we were looking for what might be called, in the big scheme of things, an intermediate solution that could provide some additional pedestrian safety on this corridor while we're out there for 15 years until either development comes through and builds to our standards, or we would, through our capital program over time, do it. In order to do that, it would have to be our money. So the conversation about reserves essentially just expands a little bit. And that little bit is 300 plus design, plus administration. So four or so. So that 156 becomes 556, maybe 80 comes off of that, so it's 4 or so. It's all still well within what we were prepared to spend for a project that didn't include any of these things that we were talking about. So to me, what's exciting is that we can even contemplate enhancements like this and still have the project come in $1 million under what we were prepared to spend for something that was much lesser. If that wasn't the case, I don't believe the administration would even be raising these questions, because it wouldn't make any sense. It's only that context that even opened the possible opportunity. And even though it's like, oh, this is another 3 or this is 150, I keep thinking in my mind, that was money that was locked up to be spent already. We would have spent that. We were prepared to do it because we had the engineer's estimate. So it's just some context with respect to that. We're out here. The time to do it is now. But if it's not, there are other things to do in the community as well. Chunky.
I know you guys are gonna bring this back when computers aren't frozen and
Numbers are sharper.
yeah, numbers are sharper. We also, when we're starting these discussions, I think we somehow have a discussion also about revenue forecasts and what we're looking at for the budget for next year. Because I think this really all needs to kind of play into that larger picture, rather than just saying, here's the immediate need and we're not going to look down the road.
Right.
If somehow we can connect those two, I know we already have some of that work done. That would be really helpful in making these decisions, so we're just not kind of walking blind.
Yeah, we're doing probably mid-April for our first quarter update. So we'll see how that timing works. We might maybe move that up a little bit. But that would be when we would normally come back. Yeah.
Dave? Other questions? Still a lot to be put together on this one, but again, we didn't want to bring it to you piece by piece by piece by piece, and there are some bigger things out there.
Does a project like this qualify for community pride awards and things like that? Does this type of a project go that way?
General public improvements? I think you can apply, or you can be nominated, whether or not, I don't recall.
Goes into design, goes into efficiencies, goes into.
We won for downtown.
Yeah, did Padden Parkway get something too?
Yeah.
I think so. I think transportation capital improvements are generally eligible for that award.
Well, today, some of those people weren't all that crazy about having their access cut back or whatever, but we were upgrading mailboxes, we're taking some of the ingress out of it. It's a safer thing. It's the design, the way you look at the sidewalks and the way they planted. I just wondered if it qualified for one of those types of things.
I just wanted to thank everybody for bringing this to us, because I think you're right. This is the time to look at this. We're in the middle of this project. It's cheaper to do it now. The bidding climate couldn't be better. So it is the time to do it. Thanks for bringing it to us.
There's only one other comment that I would make, just to keep us all remembering what we've talked about with respect to reserves. There's also keen interest that we all have on continuing to push forward on the Highway 14 corridor out to the east side. And we wanted to, circle back on the design concept. And we have a partner, a willing partner with the port who wants to go in, 50-50-ish with us on some conceptual design. That's not something that we specifically appropriated. The numbers are much smaller, in the 20s for our share of that, but that's another thing that we talked about, potentially using reserves to do to follow through with our commitment on the east side there. So just wanted to remind you that's also in the equation.
Oh, we're loading. No, we're ending.
We're shutting down.
Okay.
Another one.
Jim West, anything else you guys had on there as far as the update, or?
No, there was only 2 slides left, and I think we pretty well touched on those.
Other last questions from council on the whole East Street?
Well, I would just say today from that meeting that I was very impressed with West Tech, the project manager for West Tech. Class. And he spoke very articulately, really connected with a lot of those business owners, by saying, I understand the economic environment, we suffer from it too, and believe me, we're all in the same boat, and we'll try to minimize the inconvenience whenever we can. But I was very impressed with them. I think we've made a good choice in West Tech, at least on that scope. And Wallace as well, of course.
And from my personal experience, West Tech's been one of the better contractors I've worked with. They're very responsive, and they do have a very strong grasp on what it takes to do a project right, as well as manage it from the public involvement standpoint, and being, responding to the public's concerns appropriately, but also keeping their own concerns in cost, because they are a profit company. I can't speak more highly of them, just because we've all seen what happens when you get the other side of the spectrum. You can run into a lot of very severe conflicts.
Don't go there. Don't go there.
Litigation.
It'll be executive session update. Jennifer.
I'm sorry, I'm confused because the emails that we had going back and forth, I didn't think any council members were going to be attending this luncheon or meeting or whatever it was. So I was just curious to know if anyone approached you, or if you got cornered, or if there were any any negativity coming your way. That was my concern with Rod basically attending as the lone council member.
It was actually at the last minute where Sean, and I think it was probably the proper thing to do, invited the Public Works Committee members. So, that seemed to be proper, and I would say I don't think there was any. You could tell people were very, very, very frustrated at the onset.
Yeah, that was my concern, to have, one or two or even 3 council members alone going there, to have to face, citizens by yourselves.
I was actually quite surprised. I've talked to some of these businesses one-on-one, and at moments when they were very upset. And I didn't get that in this meeting. This was a much less negative, in fact, more positive meeting than I really expected. In fact, I was quite interested to hear several of the merchants say they liked the project and that they would figure out a way to put up with it until it was done. And so I was geared up to take some abuse, and there wasn't any.
Well, you remember, I also voted in favor of this project. So I really, really would have liked to have been able to hear and talk with them all in one spot and that sort of thing.
Maybe we
But
can
that's good that you're
cycle
bringing
members
it back.
through for like the next meeting.
Yeah, again, the purpose isn't to try and cut any council members out. It's just, once we start having a majority of members, we've got to open it to the public, we've got to notice it, we've got to do all that, and that was probably the largest place we could meet today, and we took over a majority of that room, without a doubt. John?
Yeah, well, I did feel locked out, and this was a meeting that I really wanted to attend. The fact that there weren't any skeptics of East Street from the council in attendance was also kind of disheartening. The public should have been invited. This is a public interest meeting, not something that the public should have been left out of. So I really wish, for the future, that these kind of meetings will be open to the whole council. Thank you.
Yep, and again, this, the meeting that was held today and the meetings that'll happen on a monthly basis are ones that we're directing towards the businesses specifically in order to help keep them in business. They're not meant to be a public meeting per se, even though they are. And quite frankly, if residents had showed up, that type of stuff, there certainly is nothing to stop them from being in there and being part of it, so.
I think a component, though, that's missing in that meeting, while you have the city and the businesses meeting together, you're missing the public. You're missing to hear from them. Why is it they're not driving down East Street? What would it do to attract the public down to East Street? You're just having a dialogue at that point between just the government and the businesses, and you're leaving out the people that they need to come into those businesses. So I would just think in the future, I just really would hope that those kind of meetings would change.
Any other items to do with C Street, or E Street? Let's not go to C Street.
Already been.
Okay, agenda bill discussions, Public Works. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, Public Works is submitting a professional service agreement from Wallace Engineering for the construction phase of the Zone 4 reservoir. The budgeted expenditure required is $92,504. Staff is recommending that council authorize the mayor to sign the Wallace Engineering Zone 4 reservoir professional service agreement. And with that, are there any questions on Zone 4 professional service agreement?
Dave?
Wallace Engineering.
Two questions. First of all, is this the kind of work that our proposed city engineer could do in the future?
There are portions of this work that probably could be performed by the city engineer.
Okay.
Yes.
Next one, I'm looking at paragraph 9 on E-Verify, and it says that it has to be greater or equal to $200,000 to kick in the E-Verify. This is 92,504.
And
Why is that in there?
I think this is the third phase for Wallace. They had design, and
So
then this is the
So
construction
the overall
phase.
cost is over 100K.
Yeah, that's correct.
So E-Verify will apply. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you, Jim. Chief?
It's me.
Surplus-ing police dog.
Yes. As most of you know, we have 2 narcotic canine dogs, and we're looking to go down to just 1 dog for a couple of reasons. One is the type of work that they're allowed to do now. We just don't have it.
Would you explain that a little bit?
Sure.
What changed?
Basically, a little over a year ago, there was a law that allowed us to search incident arrest. So let's say Paul's driving down the road, I stop you. Oh, you have a suspended license. I place you under arrest, and now I can go search your vehicle. And a lot of times, that's where we would find narcotics hidden. So we'd bring a dog in, they'd search it. That went away. So now, same scenario.
The legal ability to
The
search.
legal ability to go in their search has gone away, unless if there's some nexus to my stop. In other words, if I stop somebody for, I think they're DUI, and.
Or there's a cloud of smoke that rolls down.
Yep, well, even now with plain view, I look in the car, I see a pipe on the seat. I cannot search that vehicle without a search warrant. So that has changed for us, and it's kind of slowed down. So,
Changed.
well, Arizona, it happened at an Arizona case called GAM. and that's what kind of brought this.
So the courts changed it.
So the courts kind of changed it for us, yes.
And that was the Supreme Court, went clear to the Supreme Court.
Yes. So that, and then there's just some changes inside with some vacancies and moving one of our K-9 officers into detectives. It just seems like right now it's kind of the right thing to do. We're still committed to the K-9 program and having one dog, but just two is just more than,
So the K-9 doesn't belong to the officer?
no, K-9 belongs to the city.
Really?
Yeah, Shaka was donated to the city.
Shaka was donated to us.
The officer doesn't want the dog?
Well, that's, don't go there.
Well,
That's a tough one.
You know, that would have been my first option to allow, if it was me and this dog was my partner, I would, I guess, want to have first option.
Or if
to
it
have-
was retiring and not still a
Yes.
viable dog.
But this dog happens to belong to Officer Akins, and he has a dog at home, and these two dogs don't really get along all that well. Shaka's a great dog, but she's rather dominant, so there's kind of an issue there.
And she's still very viable
And,
for the work.
and that was, and thank you for bringing that. Thad struggled with that, and that she's a good dog, and she probably has another 4 years to work, and he wants her to go out and do what she does best.
And we
Besides
have
that-
departments interested.
His right arm's only 2 inches longer than his left from having to pull on it all the time. Jeez.
She's a sweetie, though.
She is a, you know, a very cute dog. We're all going to miss her, but she, if you've ever watched her work, you know that dog loves doing that. So,
So you can't sell her, you have to donate her?
well, you know, we probably could, but trying to find a value for that, and everybody's budgets are tight. So I think that's what's appealing for people to say, hey, we can get this dog, and we're kind of teetering on the idea of going that way. So it's just, you know, sweetens the deal, and for us, if she's not being used, she's sitting there losing skills. We're feeding her, we've got vet expenses, so.
I think too, just the fact that we didn't purchase her, and that she came in a donation. You know, one of the other K-9 vehicles we have is one that got donated to us from another agency, that type of stuff as well, other than outfitting it as we needed to. It was outright donated, so it's certainly at the discretion of the council what we do with that, but I think Chief said that he's got one department that's very interested, and if for some reason it doesn't work, he's got a couple more behind it that would be interested in her as well, so.
I'm perfectly happy with the idea of moving on to a new department and facilitating that however we can.
How many years do you think the other dog's got left?
Bingo?
If she stays healthy, probably 4 more years, 3 to 4.
Other questions, concerns? We're gonna have to do a decommissioning, handing
Yeah, I was gonna
over,
ask you.
something.
Yeah.
There's gotta be a,
Yeah, we'll figure
we
something
gotta
out.
tattoo the city logo or your badge on
We'll
her
have to
something.
bring her into council.
I think she
Wait a
came
minute,
in,
that's
it
a
might
good
have been her, came in one time and rolled all over the floor. There was an officer that brought the dog in a couple of years ago. Very friendly.
When she was out at the staff barbecue that we did, as long as Annie had a hot dog in her hand, she was just the most loving thing that there was. Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Community Development, Shoreline updates. Mitch?
Thank you. Yeah, just a little light reading for you. This is the coalition, if you recall, all the municipalities within Clark County, including the county, got together to save the money and pool our money to get our shoreline master plan updated. This is the coalition draft. It is not specific to the city of Washougal. So this is kind of an overall. We really put this draft out to start our clock with the Department of Commerce. There will be 3 open houses coming up over the next 3 nights. Tomorrow night, we're up in Battleground. Wednesday, we are at Clark County, and then on St. Patrick's Day, on Thursday, we're at the Grass Valley Fire Station in Camas, in the community room. So If anybody wants to come by, we'll have a CD copy of this, it's my understanding. There'll be some examples out there, but that is from 6 to 8, and it's 6 to 8 every night. So as far as process goes, we're looking at the end of the year before this has to be adopted. We will probably take this to Planning Commission in May, start in May, and probably won't be back to you guys until October or November at the latest.
I heard that there's legislation going through legislature to slow down or to draft.
Yeah, actually, Dave and I talked about that a little bit. It kind of gets into the idea of the reason for kind of slowing it is costs, and if we've already done the work to get this far, whether or not,
done.
Yeah. There may be some other elements that add cost to that, and we may want to consider that, but we definitely, we'll have to have a discussion when that comes around.
I think it would be safe to say, depending on the other jurisdictions, this is one of those that we are so far into this thing,
Yeah.
and it is so staff time consuming. Even if that legislation goes through, I would just as soon see us go back to the other 7 jurisdictions and say, let's go ahead and just finish this and be done with it, rather than stop now and restart.
And that's
all that in motion again.
It gets to a point where it's our individual decision. We could take it, what we have, and we could go from there. So it's not a matter of, we have to go back as a coalition and say, we don't, we want to continue this. We could take it, we have to. Everybody has to disperse from this point on, really, and take it their own. So we would have that ability.
Mitch, why is Woodland not in this for the portion of Woodland that's inside the county? Because virtually all of theirs is waterway.
Yeah, Woodland actually was part of the coalition, but they didn't bring any money to the table, is my understanding, as it
Kick them
relates
out
to
of
it.
the
I don't know, that wasn't my decision. If you recall, Director Boyes was very much involved with this, and so I really kind of, along with everything else, 2 feet cannonball right into the middle of it, so I'm getting up to speed with it. But it's, there's a significant amount, and it is, we have spent a lot of time on getting this documentation, and the consultants spent a lot of time too, so.
Molly?
I've read a little tiny bit about the legislation that's kind of characteristically called "whoa, not no." So they're just lengthening the time for some of these, the deadlines, the updates, from I think they were changing it from 7 to 10 years. So even if we decided not to do this year, we'd still be facing it another 2 years, right?
Yeah,
Because
and
we'd be up
ultimately,
against the
we'd
10-year
have to get there, yes. And I think if we hadn't spent any money getting to this point, then I think it's probably a bigger conversation.
Right.
But we've already spent the money, we've got this far with it, I think we could bring home.
John?
Is there any way, and maybe this isn't really applicable to this, but I know it's a lot of paper, but when we're ready to start passing things or to bring it through legislation, are there going to be things in here that are optional for us, or are these all things that we're going to just have to pass and lump it?
Well, remember
I mean,
to.
are we gonna have any kind of say? in
Absolutely,
how
Yeah,
things are-
absolutely.
most of it.
Yeah, the coalition draft, it's really, it's a very broad stroke because, and not all of it is applicable to each jurisdiction. It talks about different shoreline designations, some of which are not even in the city of Washougal. So, you have to kind of take it and look at it. Like I said, there will be a draft that's just city of Washougal. So
Right.
we'll disperse from there. And that's really where we'll get our own kind of touch on it and be able to get it to how we want it.
Okay. And will you identify those items that we're able
Yeah,
to?
there are certain things, as I'm learning going through this, I'll question something and that's a DOE requirement. You can't, those are the kind of things that you and yourself, probably the majority of us are all concerned with. And so those are the ones that, it's interesting the things that they don't take control over, and then interesting the things they do really want to say. But yeah, we'll be pointing those out as we move through that process.
Thank you.
And one thing to keep in mind too is your planning commission will just begin their process in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
And they will really work hard on this one,
Yes.
I'm sure, like they do on everything, and forward you a recommendation. And we'll think about, there's a lot to this. We'll think about, council work sessions, even while they're still going. We kind of talked about that before on these more major policy issues, as opposed to waiting all the way to the end. Maybe have some check-ins. So we'll try some different approaches with this particular policy area.
Yeah, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if we had that good direction from council as we move through planning commission. So if any of those issues come up, then I relay that to them, absolutely.
Dave?
Well, I do see one thing that I like, and that is that the legislature has been very upfront with us on this. It says here, in accordance with RCW so-and-so, shorelines of state significance will be managed as follows. Paragraph 1A, recognize and protect the statewide interest over local interest. Paragraph 4, development should be focused in already developed shoreline areas to reduce adverse environmental impacts and preserve undeveloped shoreline areas. So what we're really being told here is that there is no local control over our own resources anymore. Not if they're significant enough to attract the attention of the state.
Yeah, and I don't, the document that we've been working on does not take that approach. Whether or not that's going to fly with DOE is another thing. And so all the municipalities that have, Camas especially as well, we're saying, look, that's not, we're not going, no touch, no development.
Which I
Yeah.
admire you for trying. I think we're gonna get slapped down on this.
We may.
That's my objection. I think that we need to raise that issue with Olympia, every opportunity we get.
Right. It's not my first dance either. I think that we'll probably, get hit a little bit, but as we try to navigate through that, I think we'll get something that, there are a lot of parts, trust me, there's a lot about this that I do like. There are giving some direction and some guidance that our current shoreline master plan lacks. And so there are good things that I think will come of it.
Nothing is totally good or bad.
Right.
Just looking through here, and I need a lot more time to look at this. But under the planning commission portion on 6-3, it talks about a local citizen involvement effort and public hearings under the planning commission. And I'm just concerned or have a question about some sort of an advisory committee put together with local citizens.
There's actually already two groups. There's three groups actually. There's the Citizens Advisory Committee that's already been a part of this. There's the Technical Advisory Committee that's been a part of this, and then there's.
Is it local?
Yes, actually, there's local people on it, I should say that. John McConaughey is on. I believe he is on the Technical Advisory Committee. So, I mean, we do have people from the city who are sitting on those committees. But, yeah, it is, they're all from Clark County. Yeah.
And just to emphasize again, this is just a starting point for us locally. We begin our process now. What we got is something to work with by participating in the election.
And I once we get that Washougal draft and start looking at that and working with that, that's really where I would say we're starting our process. Right. I don't even think we're there yet, so.
We just wanted to make sure that you were aware of the public meetings that were happening and that you had a draft of the document that's going to be shared and commented on so that, you had the advance information.
And keep in mind as you go through things as well, I mean, this truly is an update to the document that we already have. So it's not something that we're starting from scratch. It's not something that we don't have something that's been approved in the past by ecology, and there are some wars that are already in the water.
Yeah, although it's 30+ years of needing updating, so.
Yep. Any other questions? Moving along. Jennifer, you want another copier?
So we got some additional information and a couple additional quotes, and so now we're ready to make our decision. So we're submitting a 5-year equipment lease option from Copytronics for a new copier that'll replace the 10-year-old beast in the back of the copier room if you've been in there lately. It's massive, and it just has been slowly breaking down. The staple option doesn't work anymore, the bigger paper option doesn't work, and it's forced us to use the color copier significantly more, which has driven up costs and caused some issues with that copier as well, because it wasn't meant to have that much use. So the actual lease price is cheaper than what we're currently paying for the workhorse in the back. So versus buying a copier and keeping it, we felt the better option would be to lease it. It's less money now, and it fits within the budget, so it wouldn't need a budget appropriation either. So that's what we'll be bringing forward, is the 5-year lease option for the mayor to sign. So that would be the recommended action.
When you looked at the qualifications, maybe that's the wrong word, but why you want this one, do you say, okay, last year we printed 20,000 copies?
Mm.
And so do you rent the copier that's supposed to be really a good one for 20,000 copies, or do you rent the one that's good for 100,000 copies? How do you break that down and get one that fits Washougal versus?
We look at the the price per copy, and then the copies per minute for speed to make sure that we can keep it going. So that's what we looked at. We didn't look at there's no minimum and no maximum copies per month. And the per copy charge, if you look at, there's a couple analysis in your Exhibit B in your handout that shows some of those different charges per copy to see which one comes in. And I believe that they're bringing in a demo, is what RJ was telling me. They're going to bring one in and put it in Director Boyd's old office. Hopefully he saw it.
He did.
Surprise! So that we can demo it for a while to make sure that it's the one we want to lease. And since we're not buying, we are leasing, there would be flexibility. If for some reason it didn't work out, we could swap it out. They're usually pretty responsive.
Leasing instead of buying.
Correct.
Yep. Dave?
First of all, thanks to you and the staff for struggling along with this thing for 10 years. And secondly, I hope that this new one will give you some relief. That's all I can.
If there's a point in that 5-year lease where you find either maybe just some other opportunity comes along that's a better deal, will we still, is there an opt-out? I'm trying to read this section 18, but
It's a little tiny, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is off the state contract, and it says it's a true municipal lease, so I'm not sure. But I can find out for sure, but I'm pretty sure that was a question that we had asked, and there's, as long as you go through another lease with them, I think that there's no pre-penalty issues. But I can confirm that before Monday.
Is it non-cancelable or refundable? Or the cancellation clause?
Is there?
Which?
Oh, there's one right here, though.
Right.
Yeah.
You may terminate the
You could probably
end of
buy
any
an
fiscal
auto.
year.
But you'd have to negotiate this.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we would end up, I mean, as long as you reinvest in a new machine with them, I think it would be.
So this is lease
Payments before.
No, I think it's just a lease to lease.
Lease for 5 years. and then
So that at the
something
end,
else.
you don't have to get rid of it, you just bring in a new, greatest of the time. New bells and whistles.
Any other questions on copiers? Okay. iPads.
Okay, well, the topic was a little bit deceiving. It's actually more of a social media use presentation. Cross your fingers that this works. If it doesn't,
She doesn't have copies.
I do have copies.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why are we looking at this to save paper, so here's copies?
Yeah.
Just in case it doesn't work.
This is my selling tool.
He had an iPad
Look at
that
all
would
this
work.
paper. I know, that's what I was thinking. If Mitch had his iPad up here, this would work.
This would be in color if the copier was working.
No, it's off, because it's not hooked up. Shut itself off. But, we'll see if this works. And I also have a handout for you that I'm not going to really go over, but it has, I got it from AWC, and it has a lot of good tips just for social media in general. for personal, work, all the above.
Municipal research had much on this right now, since things have to be changing to that direction?
Oh, yeah, they have a whole, that's what this stack of, again, more paper, 'cause you gotta write it or print it off to see it, but that's what all this stuff is. And I did contact Foster Pepper and got some of their information as well. They have a whole blog actually dedicated to social media.
They have a blog dedicated to something we're not supposed to use?
They don't say you can't use it. You just have to use it wisely, I guess, is the best way to explain it. So the agenda, what is social media, just in case folks don't know, some advantages, risks, solutions, and then I'll end with the iPad. And as you probably have seen, the iPad 2 has come out, and so I just wanted to get a little bit of guidance there. So what is social media? It's internet and mobile-based tools for sharing and discussing information. You can post videos, comments, photos, and then links to information on any other topic. Basically, some of the big things are blogs, microblogs, the networks, better known as Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and WordPress. Some advantages to using social media. It enhances communication with the public. It's a quick and easy way to communicate immediately. You can get instant feedback with your followers and that sort of thing. They can comment right back and say, hey, yeah, this looks good, or also in the negative. And you can reach out to more people, is the idea. Some of the risks involved is that people can say whatever they want. There's no editor. The amount of time that could be spent blogging and Twittering and Facebooking and all that as a city website, as a city function. So then that leads to who's responsible for maintaining the Facebook site, or who's responsible for, what is it, tweeting? I'm not a Twitterer or tweeter, so who's responsible for tweeting for the city? And some of those questions come up, and then how much of your day can get consumed with that. Negativity can bloom. Then there's also issues between personal use and city use. The packet of information I passed around had some good tips for council members and elected officials on making sure that your personal is your personal and your city is your city, and really make the city is the city's, and making that distinction, because record retention is required on the city side. And then those lines get blurred when you're blogging or Twittering or tweeting about city business, to where the city could be liable to maintain those records. So that's where it gets kind of complex as well. Then there's also security and legal risks involved. So we'll go through some of the security risks. Obviously, the security of the websites, the data being processed, and a lot of times hackers are using these social networks to come in and gain access to as many computers as they can. I've gone to in my past life, I went to fraud conferences, and they had all sorts of stuff about this, with hackers coming in and cloning your friends and then re-friend requesting you, and then when you accept their friend request, it's really this other person over here, and they steal all your information. And it was quite scary, the amount of time and effort these people go to. So it just opens that vulnerability to our systems if our firewalls aren't up to protecting against that. And I'm not an IT person, so I can't answer firewall questions, but that was in all the literature that I read, was, you really need to be aware that these threats exist. So if you have a Facebook page and you think it's odd that a new friend is your same friend that you've had, and they're asking to refriend you, don't do it. Walk away. Some of the legal risks, again, the Public Records Act. Public record is broadly defined and includes any writing that relates to the conduct of government that's created, owned, used, or retained by that government. And since it's so broad, it does fit with the Twittering and the Facebook sites. So then all that data has to be retained. We have to have some mechanism for capturing it and storing it along with retention schedules. Some of the information that I read that I'm not quite sure how it flows yet said that if you post it on your city website first, that makes that the initial document. So then the retention on the Twitter site would just be a secondary copy, and the retention isn't as long. But that still requires having the plan of attack and the records retention schedules, knowing when you can delete that and manage it. And it would create additional work to manage that whole process to make sure that we're retaining everything that we need to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But that's okay, because there's an app for that.
There's an app for that, good.
There you go.
I'm gonna know that.
And all joking aside, there truly is. You can buy different software that will capture that and store it, and I'm sure IT can take care of that. But again, it's just the process of going through and managing it, and who's gonna be responsible. There's also First Amendment risks involved. Since it's a limited public forum, we can prohibit some information that's on there. If it's obscene, harassing, or threatening language, commercial promotion, illegal activity, copyright violations, or personal attacks. However, since it is First Amendment protected rights, there are things we can't prohibit. Various comments that are based on the viewpoints that are expressed. If somebody writes something on there, obviously blogs, people like to respond. And so if it's not fitting into one of these prohibited areas, then we can't edit it. We have to leave it on there, or else we could be violating people's First Amendment rights. So again, comments critical of the city or one of you, staff members, unless it's threatening or harassing, of course, or comments from political opponents. So some of these things bring up also, who is it that's going to be commenting on our city site? How do we verify who they say they are? Who's really commenting? And some of those things that came up during actually the council goals discussion, and trying to verify some of the letters or emails that come through to see who these folks really are that are responding, could get complicated here as well. And trying to have some sort of verification process to make sure that folks that, it's not the same Joe Smith that's responding under 5 different names or whatever. That could be a consideration that we would want to look at. Open Public Meeting Act compliance. Again, it defines meeting pretty broadly, and it's any transaction of city business involving a quorum of a governing body. It doesn't necessarily mean just decisions being made. It can be discussions, evaluations, deliberations, or just receiving information. So that's one of the considerations, is that with the Twitter sites and with the Facebooks, that could be a serial meeting. A serial meeting could be created if a quorum of council members are responding and commenting and posting. An email chain is a good example of a serial message. That's why if we're trying to disseminate information, we always say do not respond to all, because that could constitute a serial meeting. And so again, that follows through onto the social networking sites, Facebook and Twitter and WordPress. Now you have to stop me if you have questions, right? So the solutions, oh, go ahead.
Back on that legal risk versus, my question would be, most of the, for instance, even the Columbia requires that you give them a valid email address and they email back to you, and you have to use the email link in order to perfect your sign up. It would be interesting to get a legal opinion on whether we can require that, and also whether we can go back further than an email address to what's called an MAC address, which is unique to the particular computer.
That is one of the underlying message in all the literature that I read, as well as your attorney must be involved in this process for setting it up and maintaining it and making the policies and procedures. So that would just be one step that we would have to fine tune if we go down this path.
So we are primarily discussing, or you're discussing right now, either a city website and city media sponsored by the city, or in this particular case, city property. So if the iPad is city property, then that we may, some of the things that we utilize it for may fall under some of these guidelines.
It gets pretty gray when you're doing personal, like if you were to log into your personal Twitter account through the iPad or even your, the city computer or something, and start blogging about city business, that could trigger that that's a public record and we need to capture it, even though it's through your personal Twitter account. And there's some examples, I'm not sure if it was in that handout that I gave you or a different one, but even non-elected folks, they gave an example of a public works director, and, sorry Jim, and he had a personal Twitter account where he kept up with all his buddies and people were following him, and he had 6 followers. Well, then he found the APAWA, that's right. He found a Twitter link on that, so he joined as, you know, oh, I'm part of this group, so I'm going to join on here. So that created more followers.
68,000 of them.
Yeah, so then, you know, it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and all of a sudden he's gone full circle and is using his personal account to blog about potentially city projects or things that his colleagues would be interested in. And it talked about how even though the city's not necessarily aware of it, it's still a public record that needs to be captured somehow because that's what's being discussed. So it just really starts to complicate things when there's city ones and then personal ones that get meshed.
I think the safe bet is that any device, communications device or technology device that's city issued to an elected official or to staff, that everything about it is discoverable under public records, including your email. And I think that's just the safe bet. So if we were to go down the road of using the iPads, it'd just be like if we had laptops for you, or if you each had a desktop where you shared a desktop and you could come in with it. And just the same as for us as employees, we have the privilege of using city-supplied technology. Everything about that is public. And what makes it trickier is I know that you all make notes on different agenda items as we're going through. The notion of the iPad would be to replace that, and you could make notes. There's some theoretical retention around those notes. It's very short. How would that play in with the iPad? But this conversation too that Jen is having, because of some of the questions that came up at our last work session when we talked about using the iPads, got into the general notion of social media and council member use of social media for engaging the public on city business. And I think one of the things that we're seeing here is that definitely if we were to create, and some communities do it, some municipalities do it, some quasi-governments do it, they're engaging in social media and they've got these policies. You just have to be cognizant of all of these things, and it's very public. But if even on your own personal Facebook page or whatever it would be, if you engage on city issues, there's the potential for that to be considered something discoverable under a public disclosure. It's gray, and you know it when you see it. And so the caution is, if you're using social media, be aware of that. I don't have my own personal Facebook page, but my wife does, and so if she was on a city council somewhere and someone used a friend or just someone in the community, a constituent, knew that, and Julie accepted her as a friend, and the next thing you know, there's a conversation going on that you might have over coffee somewhere, but now you're having a conversation on your Facebook page. Now all of a sudden, does that become some kind of record that has to be kept? And then one of your colleagues on the council, who is also a friend of yours on Facebook, sees that, and it's just a nice conversation about what's happening down at the park or something. It just can mushroom into this really big thing. And I think the advice is that of caution and wisdom around being very careful about that. Not doing it at all is the easy way, because then you don't have any risk at all. But be thoughtful about that. I think one specific question we had was, one of the advantages that Jen pointed out very early on in this was that sense of instant communication with a constituency. That's one of the things that's great about social media. What about instant communication with the constituency during the course of a council meeting. I think, John, you had that very specific question, and I think the answer is, it's okay, but it's about city stuff and city things that are happening right there, so that becomes part of the public domain and part of the public record. We gotta figure out a way to get it.
Yeah, if there's a
and
mechanism
keep
to
it.
catch it, I would totally be open to that.
Right, and that's what we would have to do. And now, you know, that's one specific scenario that could come up.
There's also a potential problem where if you have a council member who is emailing or tweeting or whatever, another council member during the meeting, but not speaking publicly about that issue, my understanding is that's a violation on the face of it.
Of the Open Meetings
Yeah.
Act, potentially. There may be something in the literature on that. Did you discover anything in the literature on that particular type of question?
I didn't see that specific question brought up, but I got lots of stuff still.
It seems intuitively that could be problematic, but we'd have to look at that. All this technology poses these questions that we never had to face before. It's like, you know, you see it in Congress and you see it at the State House where caucusing occurs all the time, and they're whispering or talking on the side while there's debate going on. But in council meetings, it's a different world. Our context is different.
The legislature specifically excludes themselves from Open Public Meetings Act and Open Records Act.
Right. So the use of technology at a council meeting or a school board meeting or a utility board meeting to caucus like that, probably, I think it might be problematic.
And then the other thing that gets very worrisome is, my understanding is that there really is not any distinction between a city-owned laptop and your personally owned laptop. If you are, for example, emailing another council member back and forth on an issue that's covered under the law using your own personal email account, not the city email account, and your own personal computer, you have now made your entire computer a public record and subject to any kind of disclosure and really wide open search.
Yeah, and I think you can shield, there's some ability, you have some ability to, you know, not have your family vacation photos be given to the public, but that concept is absolutely correct.
My understanding was that the best way to avoid that is that you never ever discuss city business except on the city email account. Since that one is archived by the city,
right,
then if all of your covered conversations happen on the city email account, that does not bring your computer, your personal computer, into the issue.
That's the safest way.
Or just write things that you don't mind other people seeing if it does get, I mean, that's.
Well, but I mean, your bank account could become a public record that way.
I think you're bending. I don't think so.
Well, that's what the attorneys were telling me, so.
We can look into, you know, what shielding there is of your personal stuff if you use your cell phone or your iPhone or your iPad, that's personal.
I think you're in good shape, you just avoid a forum altogether.
Just a comment in passing, if they're gonna look at my bank account, it's gonna be a short subject. It's probably not gonna be all that interesting. I worked for the federal government for a number of years as an information systems manager, and I can tell you a couple things about what we're looking at here. One of them is that any system can be penetrated. It's a question of how much time you're willing to spend on it. It's like taking a hill in combat. Any hill can be taken, any position can be taken, it's whether or not you're willing to pay the price. And there are a lot of people out there willing to pay the price. The second thing I found out as an information systems manager was that with every opening, every portal into your system, you would increase the vulnerability of that system to an attack. I don't know how many people out there are interested in what the city of Washougal is doing, but there are people who do this for entertainment. So I worry about opening up more portals than we need. I certainly am sensitive to what Paul's talking about. Having all of this, you're talking about a lot of storage to store all this stuff.
John?
And we have an IT company that we hired to do our IT work here. I would think that, you know, for future reference, if we're ever going to start engaging in this for the city, that would probably need to go through them. And any information provided or that needed to be sent out via social media needed to go through that portal and not in the city.
How do you mean?
Information. Well, if you've got a city blog, or if you've got a city Facebook account, or if you have a city Twitter account, you know, someone who opens that up on an off location, they're not going to be part of the grid. They're just going to go in, they're just going to open up and put in that information. Whereas if you open it up here at City Hall, you're exposing your computer to whatever may come through. So if you had someone doing social media, it would almost be good to keep it off-site, so you're not
Gotcha.
allowing it into the
Separate server.
yeah, like a separate server almost, so that way it's not getting into access to this. I think, you know, long-term, looking at social media, I think it will help us to promote the city. I think long-term, I'm tired of being out-branded by Battleground. Everywhere you turn, it's Battleground this, Battleground that. They do a great job marketing themselves. There's nothing there. We've got things here. And, you know, so, you know, I think this is for the long term, for attracting people, keeping them, in, you know, even for public safety. You know, Amber Alerts sent out over Twitter or over Facebook through the city, or, you know, here's an emergency that's
Reverse 911s at the coast this weekend.
yeah, emergency that's arisen, and we need to get out fast information to people who, you know, have their social media on their phones. You know, I think it'll benefit us long-term to have that kind of set up, that kind of information process set up. So I would look at just how do we maintain it off-site so our computers here are unexposed.
So along those lines, some of the solutions to counteract some of those risks is, of course, starting with a solid policy and procedures, covering the records retention and destruction, which would be through IT, the use of social media in the work environment, including the use of social media outside the work environment to have, I guess, just guidelines for your employees to follow, and then employee education to make sure that if we go down this road, that folks know what it entails. This might turn off because there's a red blinking battery. Reviewing the social media platform's terms and conditions, I guess there's been some issues with people applying to be the purveyor of a site, but they don't have the authority to agree to the terms because, you know, they're not the governing CEO. So making sure that we look into those if we decide to go down this path. Having a monitoring program, and then designating who's responsible for updating the information. I know that's one of the concerns that IT has right now is they take what we tell them and put them on the website, but they've always questioned, is it supposed to have any sort of checks and balances? Does it just show up? You know, what should that process be to make sure that it's consistent with our format, the right message, you know, spell checked, some of those minor things. No.
Spell check is not my.
Let me just mention that the port of Kamas-Washougal has gone through this about 9 months ahead of us at this point, and they have developed a whole bunch of those procedures. So you can talk to them about how that works.
Right, we definitely wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of examples.
One of the new things about their website that ends up saving them a lot of money is that there are a couple of administrative people who have the codes, if you will, to put stuff on the website. So you have front desk people doing that instead of $50 an hour IT people.
Right. We would just have to designate who those employees will be for. all the little acronyms or whatever that you write on. So that was what I had on social media. Again, the information from AWC was very good, so I thought that would be beneficial for everyone to see. And it leads to the iPad discussion. I'm pretty sure that I had pretty good consensus on going forward with the pilot program. But now they've thrown a loop in the plan by issuing the new version. It's the same price as the old version was, but it's faster and has 2 cameras. I'm sure there's a lot more tech, so that you can Skype. You can hold it this way, Skype, and do all those social media things. Yeah.
It's also a third thinner and a third lighter.
I think it has dual core processing, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So
What'd she say, Sean?
512
I think she said that's my new diet, something about a third thinner and.
Believe me, I've sweated over it.
So there's
You don't
a
have
lot.
it yet, Mitch?
No, I'm staying old.
I would think if we're gonna pilot it, I think it would personally would be worth just buying used in the first version, versus going with the second and expensive new.
Well, only if we can get a substantial savings.
Yeah.
That was gonna be my next comment. I did go on eBay and look around, and I didn't see, I wasn't tracking them or watching them, and I can do that, but I didn't see huge savings. I mean, they still look to be around, one was $10 with $400 shipping. Buy it now. It's kind of funny how they market that.
It's a lot of popcorn.
But,
Is there such a thing as state bid?
I don't think they do.
electronics?
Or, I called the government agency representative at Apple and to see if they would donate ones for us to, she didn't laugh at me, so that was nice.
Well,
But,
I'm not the first person that's asked that.
Yeah.
what she did do is she connected me with a company, that supposedly gave better pricing, but, I got the bid and Walmart actually beat it. I mean, you just Google iPad or whatever and you can find better
The
deals online.
other people worth calling would be the State of Washington GSA. They may have a contract.
Alrighty, I can do that. And I talked to Ryan and Eric a little bit about the differences between the old version and the new version, buying used, and Ryan was saying that with the used ones, you might not have the warranty, and there'll probably be information on there, programs on there that we won't want, which I'm sure you can probably delete, I would assume. And if it's not a significant savings, then there's no point in doing that. But then the other, it's just a preference between the old version and the new version, and if 6 months down the road, we decide that it is gonna be a pilot program, how much longer are they going to support that older model? They always encourage you to upgrade. So those are some of the questions that I probably have to get answered to make sure that it's.
Reconditioned ones?
Um,
Sometimes from
Through
Apple?
Apple. I didn't look at the reconditioned ones, but I can look at that too.
Maybe
I
for
didn't see it on their
three.
website.
Reconditioned ones would normally carry a full warranty.
That's right.
And they-
Yeah, and you can get a lot of those refurbished ones through Tiger Direct.
Through what?
Tiger Direct.
Tiger Direct?
When I used to work in an IT company, that's who we went through for all of our.
For our purposes, frankly, speed would not be a real consideration, so.
Not for me.
Well, actually, some rendering of like the maps that we get in some of these handouts, especially color maps, that's a pretty intensive use of a processor.
Do you have a problem with yours?
No, I've looked at the other one, actually quite a bit when I had this one, yeah.
Yeah.
And I held them both. It's not that significant, I'll say that. The only thing that I would say is that, they tout twice as fast. There is some speed, but this by no means is slow, by any means.
You're talking nanoseconds, aren't you?
Yeah, it's not that significant, but I think Jen's last point is probably the one, is that if you're in this pilot program and you've got certain number of apps or certain number of, iPads, then you broaden that out, are you gonna be able to go back and get that same one? The risk that you run too is that app developers are now writing apps only for the two. So when
Yeah,
you
you're
start
right.
putting those on, I mean, it's, you know, it's self-fulfilling. These get phased out because the apps that you want to run won't run.
Yeah, I've got a iPhone 3G, which is 2 generations back of current. And I'm certainly running into that problem now, that there's a whole bunch of updates and stuff that just won't go on to
Well,
my iPhone.
the new operating system doesn't go back to, I am in the same boat, doesn't go back to a 3G. So it's for all intent and purposes done. Apple won't support it anymore, and you've got to upgrade, so.
Sean, if the council were to go that route, would you want your department heads to be at the same speed? So, I mean, are we looking at 15?
Well, originally, we got into this discussion to try and cut down on all of this stuff. You know, does that extend to department heads beyond?
I have it all right here. Everything. For tonight's meeting, last week's meeting, everything.
The entire municipal code.
Yep, I got that too.
You know, I mean,
It's all searchable, right, Max?
Yes, it is.
The reason that I asked about everybody is because if you go, in essence, in a pilot program, I heard you just say, okay, you get 4, and then when you decide to upgrade, are the other's gonna be in the same ballpark? So do you, so you bite the bullet and buy everybody one?
Yeah, I don't know, because at some point, you certainly have to stop. You know, is that at department heads, is it at, you know, assistant department heads, that type of thing? You know, do we buy everybody a copier? I still like paper, I still like paper.
Is there a big cost difference between first version and second version?
About $100.
And the new version, it's the same, it's roughly the $488 to $500 that was in the last discussion,
Right.
before it came out.
Okay, there's only been a $100 drop.
Yeah.
And basically, when you look at that $100 drop, you're probably gonna have to spend that to upgrade it so that it's compatible with the apps too, right?
At some
They,
point.
in general, they are not upgradable.
Oh, they won't even update.
The problem is that though, by the time we would get a 2 in here, 3's coming off the.
Yep, I'll be the guy in that commercial.
No, they're
I
gonna
just
go
bought
for
this.
a year
Really?
before they get it.
I didn't quite.
They got a good, they have a product in high.
And the social network.
Two different discussions.
Okay.
Two different discussions.
Yeah, when we originally talked about the iPad discussion, you know, the council asked for further information on social media, so that's why I brought it forward together.
And at the same time, they're still compatible, because I think it's a lot of your sharing kind of do's and don'ts, if you guys get this. You know, just kind of make sure, you know, if you do your social media, make a copy of it, submit it to the city, and let them file it. Okay.
You know, one thing in terms of staff and iPads, you know, we have, the staff that are in the office have desktops, or a laptop that serves as a desktop and a monitor. I have a laptop and a monitor. If I had an iPad, I'd have to talk to the IT folks, but potentially there's enough computing power there where it would replace the laptop, and then it can be connected peripherally to a display and to a mouse and a keyboard, and it becomes my network device. It's just more portable, and over time, I think over time, eventually, you'll start to see these devices supplanting those types of things, although I heard that there's a comeback for desktops now, so I don't know. They're all, they will attract us to what we're supposed to buy.
The BlackBerry will never go out of style.
That is one advantage of the
Until you
2
drop
over
it.
the first version, is that it's more capable in terms of driving a monitor, mostly in terms of what you can plug into it on the side. The plugs are smarter on the second one. But either one of them, you can use a Bluetooth keyboard.
And I talked
I
to.
just, you know, one of my, one of the reasons that I'm in favor of at least doing a pilot program, if it pans out and if it, you know, reduces some of the things we've got and everything else, is the capabilities that you all and we all as a group will have in order to get things back and forth. I mean, I know how much, you know, carrying 2 of these is not a lot of fun, but there's a reason for doing it. Having a computer on that desk in there versus having 4 or 5 computers at home, there's a reason for doing it. There's also a pain to doing it, and there's also, at times, a time lag, and thankfully, we've got a lot of folks at the city that are still very good about, if something is very time sensitive, they call, instead of just, I hope you can read this on your BlackBerry, because I try not to intermingle them. But that doesn't always work either. I mean, you all have seen when I've sent stuff from home email to your city emails, because I try not to connect those to our home emails, the city system here. So there's some of that still out there. If anybody ever wants to see what's on my computers or my phones have at it, you're gonna be bored. But, you know, that's probably, Dave's comment is probably one of the first things that I've heard that puts me a little bit more in favor of trying it, is if there's a way to do that, because frankly, there's stuff that I get sent on a regular basis every day that I can't view unless I come into City Hall. It
And
either
here's your
won't come up on
poster
here,
board, right
or I don't wanna send them out.
Well, the other night, I heard Councilman Delabar say, well, where's the proclamation or
The resolution.
resolution to read by title only? Well, in the theory, then we would all have exactly the same information that you guys have out there.
Yep. So that's, to me, that's a big piece of it, and, you know, I don't think it's any surprise, the world is not gonna get slower, it's gonna get faster, and there's more stuff coming at us, and we're asked to make better decisions in shorter periods of time sometimes, and have as much information as you can have to do it. And if that's something that Mitch is sitting in a meeting that is down at the county and something's going on, and he can just forward that on to everybody and say, by the way, this is gonna come up tonight as part of our discussion in council, wonderful. Dave?
I actually have Ryan set up my cell phone so that I can, my BlackBerry, so that I can get automatically the stuff that comes to my city account, now comes to my BlackBerry. Because I was going in there once or twice a week and I was forgetting to do it all the time. Now I don't have to remember it. It comes to me automatically.
As long as you can open all the files.
I haven't had that problem yet.
The only thing that, I mean, that would be in the future, but with the iPads, you have to have unlimited email and all that kind of thing, unless you're in a Wi-Fi environment like here, you would have to have the 3G or 4G plan with the iPad. You can correct me, I'm looking at you to make sure.
Yeah, no,
There's no air card built into it.
There's Wi-Fi, so like in here, in City Hall and whatnot, it would be free.
Right.
But if you don't have Wi-Fi near your house or something like that, then you would have to actually buy the compatible version that has that in it, which costs more, and then pay for the monthly service plan.
Yeah, and that's substantially more.
I think that's really on us to get to a place where we can access it.
Yeah, I would say that.
The one
And
thing,
that was what we were assuming, is that the assumption would be that they would be used here at City Hall.
the one thing that is nice about the new situation on 3G plans, with this, you can't buy it without buying a plan. But you can buy an iPad with the capability and not sign up. In fact, you can sign up for a month and then cancel for a month, and sign up for 2 months and cancel, which you cannot do with this. But with the iPad, you're allowed to do that.
Yes.
Alright. So just some summary points. Social media sites, we do public records. We can't discriminate based on viewpoints in the comment sections. Council members should avoid online contact with fellow council members. We don't want any forums going on. And then, of course, the policies and procedures are vital to the success of using social media and training folks to know what those are. That's it.
And we do have in employee handbooks, not necessarily on social media, but we do have some policies that are already in place for
Email and internet.
email, internet access, that type of stuff, personal email and internet access for employees, and that type of stuff is already at least started to be
Correct.
discussed in there. Any questions? I'm already over my head, so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Public comment. Martha.
Oh, I was just stretching. No, I really do have a doing this. I think that this was one of the things I mentioned at one of your workshops at the end. When you were bringing up the iPads, I said that this was an important thing to do, capture social media. So I'm glad you're listening to the public and letting you know that there's some concerns that this is having to be done. And yes, the court has already a head start on you, and they're still catching up because technology changes so fast. On our state website, the Office of the Attorney General has an open government internet desk book with interpretations that you can use that draw back to the RCWs in regards to all these rules and regulations, and they're constantly updated so that you can get some more information, as well as what you've already been using, your AEWC and municipal research. It's just another pool of information, and of course, if this goes to court, the Attorney General will be involved, so it's a good source. Tweeting and emailing has already been addressed, and there's already been some fines imposed on other councils. So during a meeting, that's not okay. Tweeting each other, tweeting outside, using your laptops to communicate without the public knowing what you're saying is absolutely verboten for the RCW. So in case there was like an interpretation you're looking at, no, it's a no. You just don't do that because you're no longer doing something in the public eye. It's outside of the public arena at that point. One of the things suggested, and the court's done this, is that when you set up something at your home email and you're using emails that are for the cities, that you have a separate file, just notified as entitled city emails. And then so if someone has to access your home computer, which they can do, that's the file that they would actually pull, because that's where you would have your information, so you're protected in that way. I have a question about iPads and obsolescence. Just curious how long this will last before you have to upgrade or buy something new. And I know you're trying to save paper, and I understand that's I'm like you, I like the paper. It's just so much easier than trying to follow all of these rules. It gets complicated. But I'm wondering about the cost. Okay, you're buying the iPads and the programs to connect to, eventually having to upgrade, and then paper. So I'm just wondering what those are as far as the cost comparison. You're trying to save money, and people do appreciate having access to records, and I appreciate you having them on your website so that we can print them or at least view them. And we won't have iPads. We need to see those records too. I think that's all I have to say. I think it was a good idea to note that you need somebody to manage all of this, and who's going to capture it, and you need somebody designated that's trained to do this. So, but thank you for bringing this up. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Mark. Don?
I was pleased you folks were talking about the East Street capital project. I guess my only one comment though, I know you saved $1.5 million, and I want you to come up with the best plan. But that's an entirely different issue. You gotta have the best solution. The fact we save money is another discussion. The other thing I was wondering about on this zone phone water supply, and I was just questioning, I know that's capital money, but I'm wondering if that's something that I know you feel it has to be done, but is now the proper staging, in other words, is it, I don't know that we have a real strong need to do more annexation. And so my question would be, and I don't know if any of those funds could be used on East Street or not. And I enjoyed the last speaker here. The one thing I would say is there's a lot of business speakers, and they've taken a look at what the true productivity impact has been with automated people. And in some cases, they haven't got what they desired. I guess my final comment, I was wondering if in your mayor's report, you're going to say anything about the canvas meeting.
The canvas meeting?
The one that was Saturday.
Oh, the legislators?
Yeah.
I sure could.
Well, I'd just like to hear your perspective on
I can,
it. I'm done.
no worries. Anyone else from the public?
And Martha covered my concerns about the iPad and social media. The port is, they're still working with their implementation, and it's going quite well. And the two people, the two staff members that they have that are doing the inputting of information makes it, the information goes out very quickly and it's of course accurate. And it's so important to keep the public informed as to what's going on, then they feel a part of, you know, the process. And you know, the other concern is, you know, with the iPads, how does that include the public? How are we, well, obviously be put on the screen, but I mean, a lot of times the public is playing catch up anyway because they don't really understand a lot that's going on, but keep them as informed as possible. Then they get the feeling that they're part of the process.
Thank you, Larry. Under Mayor's report, I've got a few items. Number one, we did have a meeting this last Thursday of the Hotel Motel Tax Tourism Committee. We did approve the expenditure this year for the fireworks display, the public display off the barge. One thing I wanted to make sure and bring to the council's attention, we are going to try something a little bit new this year, in rather than have that barge towed up to off of Captain William Clark Park to actually take it out almost straight across from where it's moored at throughout the year, off of the port dock now about 500 feet out into the channel, and set it off basically from straight out from the marina. Still be visible from William Clark for those folks that want to do the boating and do the beach thing, that type of stuff. But what we're looking at doing is joining in with the port in creating kind of a family destination event down there on the 4th out of Marina Park, and at the same time hopefully bring some business to the Puffin, bring some business to the hotel, to the Black Pearl, to other businesses that start up down there as well. So we're talking about getting some light entertainment, not spending a lot of money, and picking up some sponsorships in order to pay for a lot of things that are happening down there, but to create kind of a patriotic afternoon and evening and cap it all off with a fireworks display that's visible from there and very accessible to a lot of folks as well. So that'll be something. The fireworks expenditure and the appropriation for that will certainly be coming your direction as soon as we get the agreements from Western Display. Cemetery Board, we do have a individual that I failed to bring forward to the council meeting last week. We've got an opening on there. Wilbur Smith's position had come back up for renewal. We did go out for that. We only got one other applicant besides Wilbur, who actually that applicant had to pull their name before we even got to the end of the process. So we basically only have one, and that would be Wilbur, who's been there for a while. So I'll be bringing that forth to you on Monday for your confirmation of that. East Street, I think we went through pretty well the meeting today. I was, as Don mentioned, I did go to the I'm not sure what it was, town hall, the public meeting that our 18th district representatives had on Saturday afternoon. I know Paul was there as well. I thought it was okay. I'd love to have one that is probably everything except education stuff. Not that I'm not interested in education, but it was probably 3/4 education based and more of a rally, really, for funding, for levy equalization, for a lot of things that are extremely important to the school districts and to the educators that we've got and the administrators and that type of stuff. But I was hoping we'd have some more discussions about budgets and different things that were more far-reaching in that. So that was one of my suggestions I sent back to a couple of them later. I said, great meeting, thanks for taking the time, but next time maybe you could do two, and do one that's just education-based and the other one no education, so that, everybody kind of has an equal time in there, because there were also a lot of folks there who were not educators. They were just citizens and that type of thing, and there to hear what we've got going, what they see happening, across a very wide spectrum, so. The other thing I wanted to bring up, I don't know, I've brought it to council previously, we've not gone anywhere with it yet. In regards to our ethics policies that we have within the city, I would still love to see a council committee that works with Jeanette, our HR director, just on the policies that we have in place today in regards to ethics and all the things that talks about, to see if our policies are encompassing enough to what we feel that we need as a body. So put that out there for a little council discussion. Not something we necessarily need to go into tonight. We're going on 3 hours, but I definitely want to make sure that at some point, as a legislative body, we have that discussion whether we feel that that's something that we need to do, or do we think that the policies that we've got are okay? That's all that I've got on the mayor's report. Dave?
Nothing to add beyond the agenda.
Okay. Council, David?
We reviewed the Transportation Capital Facilities Plan a couple months ago. I noticed in there that the inclusion of bike lanes on all arterials and non-industrial collectors within the next 20 years is part of our plan. And the question I've got is that required by the state? I'd very much like to put this on a workshop at some future date when we've got not much else crowding the agenda, if we ever have one of those. I'd like to find out about that. It doesn't make sense to me in Washougal. It sounds like another state mandate, and I'd like to find out if that's the case, and if so, how do we get an exception to a mandate that doesn't make sense for Washougal?
Looking at bike lanes themselves.
Well, on arterials and non-industrial collectors, which are our big streets.
Yep.
The main streets, and that doesn't make sense to me from a safety standpoint. So I'd like to find out what is the state mandate, and if it is a mandate, how in the world do we craft an exception that makes sense to us?
Okay.
One size does not fit all.
Thank you. John?
Just an update. We had the chamber board meeting this month, was here in Washougal at the Washougal Town Center. Thanks to Martha and Liz, who opened the conference room up for us. And it was a good meeting. Talked a lot about kind of what's coming up, but we also then went over to the Historical Society and presented the first minutes from the first known Chamber of Commerce from like, it was 1931 or something. I mean, it was really a flimsy document. I mean, he had to carry it with gloves, basically. So presented that to them. Like the mayor had said, we had the lodging tax committee. One of the things that was discussed in this whole concept of the 4th of July is the possibility of could we do shuttling and parking and the Pendleton parking lot, and allowing that kind of be another centralized hub where people could shop downtown if they wanted before the fireworks. They could also go up the dike and go to the beach or to Steamboat Landing is another option to kind of avoid traffic. So offering a second location for the people who would want to come and attend the fireworks. We also discussed, you know, what would it look like long-term to have a pickleball tournament? I know that that's something that we keep hearing about. What would that do to attract overnight stays, as well as what would a mountain bike race in the area also bring for overnight stays? And so these are areas that we're kind of looking into to see if there's any possibility of bringing in revenue to the city. Let's see. I don't know that I ever got an answer on this, and maybe I did and it just escaped my mind. Did we ever get a hold of Airspeed about the internet access that we have here in the building, also in the square?
Isn't it back up?
Yeah, we did.
Yes, we got an answer.
Yeah, but now at a loss what the answer was, but I thought it was a good answer, meaning that we were okay.
Now, are we using AirSpeed here for our internet?
Not in City Hall.
Not in City Hall. Was that part of the original agreement? I thought it was.
It doesn't really penetrate the walls is the problem.
Yeah, I think originally that was a part of the original agreement, and then they were gonna provide free Wi-Fi for the basic, like, Reflection Plaza and that surrounding environs, but that whole plan never took off. So, I mean, they wanted to be able to do
nodes.
Wi-Fi all over the area, and nothing
And
ever happened.
Airspeed signal here.
Do you?
And I know, right after that, there was some glitch where it wasn't up for some period of time. It wasn't a long period of time, and matter of fact, it was like a couple of days after we got the note of, yep, it's up, it's going, all that. I walked over for coffee over at Papa's, and there was somebody sitting there in the plaza, you know, doing something, going, hey, how's that wireless work? This is pretty cool. Okay. So, he was connected.
The other thing I wanted to ask too, I got an email back from Jennifer today in regards to the Planning Commission, and I would even say that maybe the Parks Board, we need to do this as well, how their meetings are recorded, and then if we could get them posted on the internet as well. One of the questions that I had was, you know, how do I review and listen to how the meeting went? Because, I mean, obviously, I kind of feel at some level, it's almost kind of a conflict for me to attend in some way. And so I want to be able to still keep up with it, but the only way for me to do that is to come into City Hall and listen to tape. Is there any way that we can do an audio file and then make that accessible for either the council or the public at large, so we can hear how the meeting went? I don't know, it's just a recording mechanism.
I think we'd have to have a better audio system in order to do that.
Well, they utilize the same one
Yeah.
that we do. Parks Board and Cemetery Board.
Yeah, we initially when we had talked about putting it on the website, at that time there was a lot of discussion about the breaking down of that file, getting it on the website. There was a lot of time that went into that, and whether or not it was really effective in order from a cost standpoint. I don't know if all those issues were resolved, but it's a matter of us. We can do a DVD and then burn a DVD, you know, that we can do it that way.
I just want access to it, and I
Yeah.
don't want to have to come down to City Hall and spend hours going through tapes.
Right. Tape is all we have, or have been using.
Might as well have
We can
reel-to-reel
use this
as far as
CD.
that's concerned. I mean, you know, I want to have a file that you can, and I say, can I hear this meeting, and you can email me the file. That would be great. Or even if you could give it to me on a thumb drive or a disc.
A disc,
You know,
yeah. We
something.
can, a disc we do pretty easy.
Something that'll make it easier than coming down and spending I love City Hall, but I don't want to spend 2 hours of my day here. So.
We should make sure, though, that Rose and Sarah both know how to operate this system. 'Cause I was surprised when I saw that we still have the cassettes out there, because I'd asked that we get away from those because of the reliability of them and having the backup system in here as well, so.
And then along the same lines, we talked about putting a new video camera system in here. When we do that, is it possible to move that camera? I know it's kind of old, but maybe move it. Do we have any kind of security in the lobby?
I don't know about in the lobby, we
Not
do
in
in the
the lobby.
office.
I mean, in the office, when people walk in that front door?
Yeah.
We have video?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
We have video, we don't have tape.
Correct.
Right.
It's real time, there's nothing recording anything. But they've got it in
But
there so that they could see
it's
if they're in the
visible.
vault or if they're somewhere else. There's split screens up there that tells
Oh,
when
okay.
somebody's coming
Okay.
through.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Yep. Jennifer? Paul?
I mentioned earlier, I went to the CREDC meeting. Anyone who's interested in that, the guy, Billu is Billeu something or other, is his name, and he puts himself somewhere between an Austrian and a Keynesian, although when I talked to him a little bit, I'm not sure exactly what he meant by that. But in any case, the meeting was 3 hours long, and it's available on CVTV.
It was on yesterday.
And especially if you've got a DVR at home, you can set it up to record it. It's on, I think it's Thursday morning, something like 2 to 3 a.m. or something like that. And it was pretty interesting, and all of the slides are available on the CREDC website. I went to the legislative town hall, and talking to people afterwards, there were a number of people who really felt that the meeting was hijacked by a very narrow interest group of teachers. You notice that Mr. Neerland, who's the superintendent at Camas, introduced himself but did not engage in any of that other than the equalization, levy equalization stuff. But all of the other certification issues and so forth. Turns out, once people looked into it, most of the people who dominated the meeting weren't from the 18th district, they're all from the 17th.
Yeah, I agree.
They actually came from Representative Harris's town hall, which was just a little earlier in the day, and came over en masse to the Camas Library for ours. And that was my own feeling, is that they really did hijack what should have been an 18th district meeting and wasn't.
No wonder we were one of the best attended.
Yeah.
Well, the one guy that I was interested in was the guy that was talking about transportation. And he got really, I mean, he got to say what he wanted to say. But I'm sure other people wanted to talk about that area and they didn't get a chance.
What else? Chamber of Commerce meeting this Thursday. And for those who enjoy such things, County Auditor Greg Kimsey has an annual St. Patrick's Day party that the public is invited to, and that's at Green Buddies, something rather. If you Google it, it'll come up.
Green Meadows.
Green Meadows. And on Saturday, this coming Saturday, the Clark College is having an open house for their cooking and wine school at Columbia Tech Center from 11 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon, open to the public. I will try to make it myself. That's it.
Samples. Rod?
Two things. One, what I took away from that meeting today with the business owners on East Street was a lot of the appropriate information versus what, you know, some of the restaurant owners, they hear people come in and complain, and a lot of that's information that isn't necessarily exactly what's going on. So a couple of them said that they would, whenever they got back to their business, they were going to try and correct some of those things. That was very positive, I think, on their part. The other thing that I did the other day was I happened to turn on one of the channels, and Will Noonan was standing there, and there was a stormwater through Clark County, and they came out, and Will was standing around one of the catch basins out there and talking about our stormwater retention ponds. So we made the TV.
Very cool. Molly?
No, I did have a couple of things, but as I didn't write them down and it's been a 3+ hour meeting, I think I'll pass tonight.
Not a worry. Anything from any other department heads that we didn't cover? Okay.
Thank you,
We're adjourned. Thank you.
God bless you, Molly.